Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. I am the living devil, and the Empress advises me to calm down. Chapter 1. Great Joe. Council Hall. Your Majesty, the flood disaster in the capital and other places has affected a wide range of areas and is extremely serious. Now the food for disaster relief is not enough. In the court, a middle-aged man in a purple official robe and a goldfish bag around his waist looked serious. This man is Li Yifu, the Minister of Revenue of the Great Zhou. On the spacious and luxurious dragon throne, a woman in a dragon robe leaned back slightly, frowned, and a trace of doubt appeared on her cold and noble face. I just allocated 300,000 kilograms of food half a month ago. How come it's gone so quickly? Although 300,000 kilograms of food is not much, if it is cooked into porridge and used to relieve the victims, it can last for many days. Li Yifu was a little embarrassed. Maybe there was a loss in the middle. Everyone in the hall was silent. They are all old hands in the officialdom, how could they not understand the truth? Wu Zhao's phoenix eyes suddenly glared, her eyes were as sharp as a knife. Lose, how far is Duji Road from Luoyang? Did those fools embezzle my relief grain? The palace was silent. No one said a word. In the silent palace, only the cold voice of the Empress echoed. I spend so much salary every year to support so many officials, and these fools are still not satisfied. They dare to take the relief grain for the victims at such a critical moment. How audacious! Wu Zhao's full chest rose and fell, and she was obviously very angry. Although she had lived in the deep palace for a long time, she was not a fool. How could she not know the tricks in this? She dispatched 300,000 kilograms of grain, which passed through layers of checkpoints and arrived in the hands of the victims. I am afraid that only 1 in 10 would survive. These empire's termites, who are corrupt on weekdays, dare to embezzle at the critical moment of disaster relief. They simply don't take her, the emperor, seriously. The grain they embezzled was the life-saving grain of the people. Wu Zhao clenched her white fists, wishing to kill all these corrupt officials and make them bleed like a river. But her remaining reason told her that this was impossible. Even if she was the emperor, she couldn't go against the entire officialdom. Wanton killing would only make her rule unstable. Wouldn't it be less greedy if she changed a group of people? How cruel were the methods of Zhu Yuanzhang, the emperor of the neighboring Ming dynasty? Did the corruption stop? No matter how cruel the methods were, corrupt officials could not be eliminated. The hall was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Wu Zhao took a deep breath, and her cold and beautiful face seemed to be stained with a layer of majesty and indifference. Li Shengshu, how much grain can be mobilized from the Luoyang granary? Li Yifu said cautiously. Reporting to His Majesty, there have been continuous natural disasters in the past 2 years, and many parties need disaster relief. Now the grain that can be mobilized in the granary is at most 500,000 kilograms. However, the flood in the capital is now receding. As long as we can survive this period of time, the disaster will be resolved. Wu Zhao's slender white fingers tapped lightly, making a crisp sound. She narrowed her narrow eyes and said indifferently, "Oh, the question is, how much will be left after these 500,000 kilograms of grain are distributed?" Li Yifu was speechless and dared not answer the Empress's words. Even though he was the minister of the Ministry of Revenue, he still did not dare to do such a thing as overturning everyone's table. Corruption is a thing that is repeatedly banned. Let alone the officials at the lower levels, even the high-ranking officials in the hall, are there no corrupt officials? If he really wanted to stand against the officials of the Great Zhou, he would be dead, not to mention the Minister of Revenue, even the Prime Minister would be dead. Some things are fine if they are kept under the table, but if they are all exposed, it will not look good. Seeing Li Yifu fall silent, Wu Zhao smiled coldly. She knew the principle of officials protecting each other, and she also knew that such things could not be banned. But she was still extremely disappointed. She said lightly, "These 500,000 kilograms of grain are the last hope of the victims in Duji province. If the disaster relief is ineffective, it is very likely that the people in Duji province will suffer heavy casualties. In such a critical situation, I wonder which noble family is willing to help me solve the problem." Her phoenix eyes swept across the ministers in the hall. Most people bowed their heads silently, like sculptures, and some people looked embarrassed, as if they were worried about the country and the people, but they still did not respond. Just kidding, the Empress is quite dissatisfied with Li Yifu's ineffective disaster relief, and now she wants to find someone to do the final disaster relief work. However, who can stop the exploitation of grain? Even Li Yifu, the minister of the Ministry of Revenue, can't do it. What can they do? What's more, if they really want to pretend to be noble and slaughter those officials who embezzled grain, wouldn't they put themselves on the opposite side of the officialdom? I'm afraid they won't even be able to survive in the officialdom in the future. Who is willing to do this? The most important thing is, if you can do something that even Li Yifu can't do well, wouldn't it tell others that the Minister of Revenue is not as good as you? Isn't this a slap in the face of the Minister of Revenue? Aren't you afraid of being bullied in the future? Due to various factors, no one dared to stand up. For a long time, there was a dead silence in the hall. Wu Jiao clenched her fist hidden in her sleeves, and her phoenix eyes were cold. This group of good-for-nothings. When they are seeking credit, they are more powerful than each other, but when it comes to doing things, they are all turtles. She was furious. She wanted to drag all the people in front of her out and behead them. However, such an idea can only be thought of, even if she is the emperor, it is impossible. After a while, Wu Jiao rubbed her eyebrows tiredly. She became a little bored. This is her empire. At the critical moment, no one dared to stand up to share her worries. She waved her hand helplessly. In that case, this matter is still Li. Your Majesty, I am willing to obey your orders. A cold voice interrupted her. Wu Jiao was stunned, and looked in the direction of the voice with some surprise. Everyone was also stunned. Who is this fool? Isn't this looking for death? In the public eye, a young man wearing a scarlet official robe, a futu, and a handsome face stepped forward. Hiss. Everyone was shocked. Isn't this the top scholar who just passed the imperial examination last month? Yang Yi was looked at by everyone with astonishment, and he was a little speechless. Although he is a newcomer, he is a time traveler in the era of information explosion. He has watched countless palace fighting dramas. He has seen pigs run even if he has not eaten pork. Of course, he also knows the truth that the first bird to come out will be shot in the officialdom. But who made him suddenly awaken the poison scholar system just now? In front of him, a virtual screen appeared. Ding! The poison system is loaded successfully. Host: Yang Yi. Poison value: 0. After the poison master system awakens, as long as the host offers or uses poisonous tricks to arouse the emotions of the people around him, he can obtain the poison master points, and the poison master points obtained can be used to purchase goods in the system store. The system store is all-encompassing. As long as the poison master points are sufficient, it is possible to become an immortal. Yang Yi also saw an opportunity, otherwise he would not stand out stupidly. As long as this opportunity is grasped properly, he may be able to obtain a large amount of poison master points. The hall fell into a strange silence. Li Yifu glanced at Yang Yi in the crowd calmly. The officials next to him had different looks, some sneered, some sighed, some mocked, and so on. This top scholar might have become a fool after reading books. Is this matter so easy to wade into muddy water? Wu Jiao's eyes were a little complicated. She didn't expect that the top scholar who stood out in the end was the one she had just pointed out last month. Among all the civil and military officials in the court, there was no one who was just 20 years old and had the courage to do so. When she needed help the most, only Yang Yi was willing to serve the emperor. The Empress's cold heart softened a little. She was silent for a moment. I am very happy that Yang Qing is sharing the country's worries, but Yang Qing has just entered the officialdom and has no experience in disaster relief, so forget it. Everyone was stunned. Your Majesty is protecting Yang Yi, afraid that something will happen to him. Li Yifu narrowed his eyes, feeling a little jealous. I didn't expect that I didn't do this well, but let a young boy take advantage of it. This kid pretended to come out and express his attitude, and won the favor of His Majesty, and even His Majesty now opened his mouth and didn't need him to go into battle. He doesn't have to take any risks, and he can be in the emperor's heart. This kid made a lot of money. The others also thought of this, and looked at Yang Yi enviously. This kid is so lucky. In the public eye, Yang Yi was confused. No, what's going on? He just took this opportunity to accumulate some poison points, but the Empress didn't let him go. How could this be possible? He hurriedly said. the disaster is serious, and the people are in dire straits. I sincerely want to serve my country, and I hope your majesty will not refuse. Wu Jiao fell silent. This is the first time she has seen such a loyal and patriotic minister. She has been on the throne for a short time and has no real confidant. Yang Yi in front of her has a clean family background, is courageous, and is also the top scholar. Perhaps he can be trained to be her confidant. She looked at Yang Yi with a softer look. In that case, I will not stop you. I will appoint you as the imperial envoy for disaster relief in Duji province. The disaster relief affairs in Duji province will be fully handed over to you. Yang Yi was delighted and said immediately, I accept the order. Isn't this the opportunity? The ministers looked at each other. Your Majesty is really desperate. You actually gave such an important matter to a young boy. But they didn't have any objections. Anyway, someone can take the blame. The relationship between the Great Zhou and the Great Tang is closely related. So the system of the Great Zhou is not much different from that of the Great Tang. On the basis of the county system, the Great Zhou added a Dao-level administrative district, and implemented a 3-level administration of Dao, state, and county. The main areas where floods occurred in Duji Dao were Zhengzhou and other places. After Yang Yi received the order from the Empress, he immediately dispatched granaries to receive disaster relief. 10 days later, the Great Zhou Palace, Qianyuan Hall. Behind the curtain. Hey, the officials in Zhengzhou haven't been asking me for food in the past few days. As the disaster in Duji Dao alleviated, is this Yang Yi really good? Wu Jiao was a little surprised, holding the memorial in front of her. Shangguan Wanner, who was standing beside her, poured a pot of hot tea for the Empress, smiling. Your Majesty has a good eye for talent. Wu Jiao raised her eyebrows. You don't have to flatter me. This Yang Yi has some courage, if not anything else. If he can handle this matter well, I will definitely use him. Humph, all the civil and military officials in the court are all depressed when they encounter problems. I give them so much salary every year. It's ridiculous that a newcomer has to handle this matter in the end. Shangguan Wanner pursed her lips and smiled. No matter what, your Majesty has also found a good horse. Wu Jiao's cold and beautiful face showed a smile. As long as this matter is not handled too badly, even if he is targeted by those corrupt officials, I will definitely protect him. Humph, it's rare for the Great Zhou to have a courageous and honest official. Just then, a burst of hurried footsteps sounded. Your Majesty, the Minister of Revenue Li Yifu wants to see you, saying that there is an urgent report of disaster. A maid hurried in. Wu Jiao frowned and said in a deep voice. Let him in. Yes, Your Majesty, the maid responded. After a while, Li Yifu hurried over with an unpleasant look on his face. Your Majesty, something happened in Duji province. Wu Jiao's heart sank and she said sternly. What's going on? A hint of pride flashed in Li Yifu's eyes, and he said seriously. Reporting to Your Majesty, Zhengzhou and other places were severely affected by the disaster. Hundreds of thousands of disaster victims had no food to eat. The local granaries were severely damaged and could not supply them, so they had to rely on the court to allocate grain. After Your Majesty appointed Yang Yi as the imperial envoy for disaster relief, Yang Yi was so bold that he dared to mix sand into the best disaster relief grain. He must have pocketed part of it. The grain distributed to the disaster victims was so wasted, causing public resentment. This person's actions brought disaster to the country and the people, and ruined Your Majesty's reputation. What? Wu Jiao heard this, her phoenix eyes widened, her eyes were stunned. The 1,000-mile horse she was just praising actually did such a ridiculous thing. Mixing sand into the disaster relief grain. You are greedy, but you also mix sand. You are really a living devil. Her heart sank to the bottom of the valley. She could imagine that once the disaster victims received the grain mixed with sand, they would definitely scold the court for being incompetent and call her a tyrant. Wu Jiao gnashed her teeth. How could this guy be called a good horse? He is clearly a traitor. Wu Jiao's full chest rose and fell. She tried to calm herself down, but her head was still a little buzzing. Yang Yi had actually wasted the last 500,000 kilograms of grain. If it caused a mutiny among the victims, the consequences would be. Wu Jiao's eyes went dark. She clenched her fists and said coldly. Send someone to Dujidao immediately and bring this fool back to me. Also, Send someone to investigate. I want to know everything there. Li Yifu said respectfully. Yes, Your Majesty. Half a day later. The news that Yang Yi had distributed relief grain mixed with sand in Zhengzhou and other places was spreading like wildfire in the court. Countless people were shocked by Yang Yi's courage. They only dared to embezzle a little secretly. This new champion was so blatant. Be greedy, but he actually mixed sand into the relief grain to make up for it. She was not afraid of angering the disaster victims and causing a mutiny, which was a capital crime. For a time, countless impeachment memorials were sent to Wu Zetian's desk like snowflakes. Yang Yi's disaster relief became a joke. Hey, Minister Liu, I heard that the new champion got into trouble. Oh, you all know about it. This kid is really bold. Yeah, who said it wasn't? He actually dared to be greedy openly. This kid is finished. Tisk tisk tisk, I heard that officials in Zhengzhou and other places were dumbfounded when they opened the grain. HMPH, Her Majesty the Empress will not forgive him this time. Yes, the impact of this disaster is not small. The neighboring countries are all watching. Now this kind of thing has happened again. I'm afraid it will embarrass other countries. HMPH, embarrassment is small, don't cause a peasant uprising, that would be the end. I said that the kid is not good. He had to stand up and take the job at the beginning. Now it's good, he really deserves it. Yeah, he didn't have that ability, but he had to make trouble. Now he's finished. 3 days later, the council hall. Civil and military officials are on both sides. On the dragon throne, the Empress was high above, with unparalleled power. Her cold eyes stared fiercely at a young figure standing in the hall. Yang Yi, someone impeached you for mixing sand into the disaster relief grain, is this true? Everyone's playful eyes fell on the young and upright figure. Yang Yi blinked and said calmly. Yes, although he had been running around these days, he was still extraordinary and looked heroic, which made many people nod in their hearts. This kid is a little greedy, but his demeanor is really handsome. Wu Zhao clenched her white and tender fists, and her sharp eyes seemed to pierce Yang Yi's eyes fiercely. This fool actually admitted it so frankly, as if he had done nothing wrong. Her anger was almost transformed into substance. Wu Zhao said coldly, so, you plead guilty. Yang Yi blinked. Confess, I am not guilty, Your Majesty. Not only am I not guilty, I have also made merits. The hall was suddenly quiet. Everyone stared at Yang Yi in amazement. This kid is really bold. At this time, why don't you kneel down and cry to Your Majesty for mercy? Still want to provoke the emperor? Is he afraid that he hasn't lived long enough? Li Yifu glanced at Yang Yi and sneered in his heart. He said indifferently, how dare you deceive the emperor? You still don't admit it at this time. I have already investigated your sand mixing. You embezzled the disaster relief grain and gave the sand-mixed disaster relief grain to the people. It is simply unforgivable. How can you be meritorious? Yang Yi said with a smile. Li Shengshu is only half right. Li Yifu was stunned and frowned. What do you mean? He was a petty person. Although he had no conflict with Yang Yi stood up to take over his place to continue the disaster relief, which made him somewhat dissatisfied. Now there is a chance to add insult to injury, of course he will not let it go. Yang Yi did not look at him and bowed to the Empress. Your Majesty, although I mixed sand into the disaster relief grain, it is also excusable. And the matter of embezzlement of grain mentioned by Li Shengshu is even more false. His voice fell. The palace was silent. The ministers looked at each other in bewilderment. They underestimated Yang Yi's shamelessness. He had mixed in the grain, and it was excusable. Lu Feng, the censor, stood up immediately, spitting everywhere. Asshole, as an imperial envoy of the court, you mixed in the grain for disaster relief and oppressed the victims. This is a heinous crime. Don't try to make excuses. The rest of the people echoed. Yes, you are corrupt, but you still try to make excuses. You are really shameless. You are so bold at such a young age, what will happen in the future? You even want to squeeze the grain of the victims. Are you still a human being? At this point, you still want to defend yourself. You deserve to die. Quote. For a while, the court became a little noisy. Many self-proclaimed noble censors jumped out and scolded Yang Yi. Li Yifu glanced at Yang Yi with a smile. Still stubborn when death is imminent. Wu Zhao glanced at the court, which was like a busy city, and glared at the jumping censors with some disgust, and said coldly, "Shut up." Her cold voice seemed to carry some unspeakable power, and the palace suddenly became quiet. Wu Jiao looked at Yang Yi sharply, with hesitation in her eyes. "You said you didn't embezzle. It's justifiable to add sand. What's going on?" Everyone's eyes fell on Yang Yi. Yang Yi took a deep breath and smiled. "Reporting to your majesty. Whether there was embezzlement of grain, just send people to Zhengzhou and other places to check the grain. How dare I speak nonsense? As for the addition of sand, it was my strategy." Strategy. The officials were confused. Wu Jiao frowned, a little confused. Li Yifu's heart sank, and he had a bad premonition. Yang Yi continued, "These 500,000 kilograms of grain are all transported to the capital. If nothing is done, these white grains will be exploited by those officials, and there will be very little left when they reach the disaster area. If so, what effect will the disaster relief have?" Wu Jiao nodded slightly. "Isn't it because of this that she sent Yang Yi to provide disaster relief? So, I mixed sand into it." Yang Yi's voice was clear and his eyes were calm. "Those officials who are used to eating refined grains will not be greedy for the grain mixed with sand, but will discard it like a worn-out shoe. After all, who would eat grain with sand in it? But the disaster victims are different. They have been hungry for a long time. Even if there is sand in the grain, what does it matter as long as they can fill their stomachs? In this way, the 500,000 kilograms of grain can reach the hands of the disaster victims without any difference to relieve the famine." Silence. The hall was dead silent. Everyone stared at Yang Yi in amazement, their scalps tingling and their faces showing shock. "Genius. This plan is absolutely amazing. It's just a little bit sinister." Li Yifu's eyes widened. "It's actually possible. They were all fooled by this kid's plan." Wu Jiaofang's eyes were full of astonishment. Her rosy lips could hardly close. There is actually such a trick. She never thought that Yang Yi's move of mixing sand was actually to prevent the exploitation of these corrupt officials. Come to think of it, those officials who are pampered and well off, seeing these grains mixed with sand, how can they be interested in greed? Such a plan is really too high, but it's a bit too much, and it's hard for the people in the disaster area. But being able to survive is the greatest luck. How can a normal person come up with such a thing? Wu Jiao took a deep breath and looked at Yang Yi with a much softer look. "So, you have indeed made a contribution." Yang Yi smiled slightly. The relief grain was delivered to the disaster area. In addition to those corrupt officials, there were also many well-fed wealthy families who pretended to be disaster victims to receive relief grain. They would not be able to eat the grain mixed with sand. In this way, there may be people pretending to be disaster victims to receive relief grain at the beginning, but there will be fewer and fewer people later. In this way, it can be guaranteed that all the relief grain can be used for the victims to the maximum extent. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Sand actually has this use. Li Yifu's face turned dark. This is good. Yang Yi's corruption can be cleared with a little investigation. And Yang Yi's move to solve the disaster and comfort the people is the top priority. This is a proof of ability. The worst thing is that with a newcomer like Yang Yi, doesn't it make him, the old man, incompetent? He dragged his feet on the disaster relief work and couldn't solve it, and he had to ask His Majesty for food. But Yang Yi solved it easily once he made a move. The gap was too big. Wu Jiao was also stunned, and then patted the dragon throne excitedly. "Good, well done. No wonder the capital and the capital are calm these days. It turns out that you have already solved the disaster. Yang Qing, you have made a great contribution." The eyes of everyone looking at Yang Yi suddenly changed. No one thought that Yang Yi would have such a method. This strategy is too old-fashioned. It makes those corrupt officials run around in circles. So that's how it is. Yang Yi is really unfathomable. Yes, I said he was not that simple. Your Majesty is also very discerning and can judge people with wisdom. This boy is very smart. Although this plan is a little unreasonable, it is a good plan if it can solve the problem. Quote. Many people praised him and looked at Yang Yi in shock. Li Yifu looked embarrassed. The praises from these people seemed to hit him in the face like slaps. His face flushed, and a feeling of resentment lingered in his chest. Your Majesty, we can't just listen to his one-sided words. Li Yifu was jealous and angry, and couldn't help but said. The hall suddenly became quiet. Many people looked at Li Yifu in astonishment. This Minister of Revenue is targeting Yang Yi. However, they reacted quickly. Although this new champion did not provoke Li Yifu, the better the disaster relief work was done, the more it would slap Li Yifu in the face, wouldn't it? It was understandable that Li Yifu lost his composure now. Wu Jiao frowned and glanced at Li Yifu coldly. Li Yifu was startled and immediately realized that he was jealous and lost his composure. He was a little annoyed. But it was impossible for him, a senior official of the 6 ministries, to admit that he had a problem at this time. He gritted his teeth and said with a stiff upper lip, "I heard that people in Zhengzhou and other places were grumbling. This is true. Perhaps we should investigate it carefully and not just rely on Yang Yi's one-sided words." Yang Yi pouted. Those who pretended to be disaster victims will certainly feel dissatisfied when they eat sand. I wonder if the boiling public resentment mentioned by Li Shengshu refers to the real people who were affected by the disaster, or the rich and corrupt officials who want to take advantage. Li Yifu was choked to death and his face turned red. Just then, a guard hurried in. "Your Majesty, urgent news from Duji province." Everyone was stunned and their eyes fell on the guard. Wu Jiao raised her eyebrows. "What's wrong?" The guard presented a wrinkled cloth with mottled handwriting on it. The disaster victims in Duji province and other places heard that the imperial envoy Yang Yi was escorted back to the capital. The public was excited and gathered the people to write a letter to the people to redress the grievances for the imperial envoy Yang Yi and ask Your Majesty to see clearly. Hiss. Everyone took a breath and looked at Yang Yi in shock. This kid really did something wrong in Duji province. How can he be so popular? Li Yifu's face turned black. He just said he wanted to investigate the public sentiment. The public sentiment is here. This is too embarrassing. Wu Jiao was also shocked. She looked at Yang Yi with some surprise, and admired him in her heart. It seems that Yang Yi has done a good job in the capital and the province these days, otherwise he would not have received the Book of the People. The disaster handling matter that was about to fail, through Yang Yi's hands, instantly became a model of officials and the people being one family. It is simply a textbook disaster relief. Wu Jiao was more and more satisfied with Yang Yi. She nodded slightly, and raised her snow-white chin. The public opinion is like this, I have seen it. Yang Qing, you did a good job. I am very satisfied. Yang Yi bowed. This is my duty. Everyone looked at Yang Yi with envy and jealousy. With the attention of the Empress, he will be in the Emperor's heart in the future. Are you afraid that he will not be promoted and make a fortune? The court meeting ended. Yang Yi was just about to leave. Shangguan Wan'er appeared in front of him. Sir Yang, wait a moment, the Majesty wants to see you. Yang Yi was stunned. The Empress wants to see him. He glanced at the poisoner value that had skyrocketed by nearly 30,000 in the system and nodded slightly. These days, because of the sand mixing incident, his poisoner value had skyrocketed a lot. He originally wanted to go back and think about the system store, but now that the Empress has invited him, he has no choice but to go see the Empress first. I just don't know what the Empress wants to see him about. Opening square bracket. In the Qianyuan Hall. Your Majesty, Yang Hanlin has arrived. Shangguan Wan'er bowed slightly. As the new champion, Yang Yi should be admitted to the Hanlin Academy and serve as an editor of the Hanlin Academy. So it is reasonable to call him Yang Hanlin. Behind the curtain. A graceful figure sat down, wearing a casual dress with a light golden dragon pattern, red and gold, full of nobility. Give Yang Qing a seat. Wu Jiao's voice full of feminine charm echoed in the hall. The maid next to her hurriedly brought a stool. After thanking him, Yang Yi sat down carelessly. To be honest, he had only seen the Empress up close once since he traveled here. The last time was during the palace examination. He was still quite curious about this famous Empress in history. Wu Jiao raised her eyebrows and admired Yang Yi. You have done a good job in disaster relief this time, neatly and ingeniously. It's a waste of talent to stay in the Hanlin Academy, why don't you come to work for me? Yang Yi heard this without hesitation. As Your Majesty orders. Of course he would not refuse to hug the Empress's big white legs. This is the king of a country. Besides, staying in the Hanlin Academy with a bunch of old men every day is not ordinary boring. Following the Empress, at least it is pleasing to the eye. Wu Jiao nodded slightly, and her liking for Yang Yi increased a little more. She quite appreciated this decisive character. Then from tomorrow, you will come to Qianyuan Hall. I will appoint you as Zongshu Sharon, and you will be with me from now on. Yang Yi thanked him immediately. Thank you for your grace, your majesty. Promotion. The position of Zongshu Sharon is not ordinary, helping the emperor draft edicts. It is equivalent to a secretary. Being the emperor's secretary is not easy. Staying with the empress every day. With such a beautiful empress, he doesn't mind committing the crime of riding the emperor. Wu Jiao certainly didn't know what Yang Yi was thinking, otherwise she would have killed this lecher with a knife. She leaned back slightly on the chair, her long black and smooth hair fell down, revealing her pointed and fair face, and her black eyes looked at Yang Yi with a smile, because the clothes she wore were quite loose, and her full chest supported the clothes, outlining a perfect arc, and her slender white fingers held a memorial. The relations between the several major countries in the Central Plains and the Turks are not good, especially our Great Zhou. The Turks are considered to be our Great Zhou's neighbors, but this neighbor is not very peaceful and always harasses our Great Zhou's borders. Recently, they have frequently violated the border. Yang Yi nodded slightly. Even if he is not a military officer, he has some understanding of this. In this world, the land is extremely vast, and countries such as Qin, Han, Tang, and Ming all coexist in the world. And foreign countries such as Liao, Jin, and Yuan are all gathered in the north and west. Among them, the Turks and other tribes are the most active, and they are neighbors with Tang and Zhou. The Turks like to plunder cities in the Central Plains, which can be regarded as a traditional craft. Wu Jiao raised her eyebrows and pursed her rosy lips slightly. The Turks are fierce in war. My Great Zhou has been hit by natural disasters in recent years. I really can't afford to continue to entangle with the Turks. But the Turks are nomadic peoples in the north. It is not easy to seize the opportunity to defeat them. The Great Zhou needs time to recuperate, but there is no way to counter the Turks in war. I would like to ask you, what do you think? She looked at Yang Yi with an inquiring look, and her majestic and cold face showed a hint of expectation. Yang Yi gave her a surprise in disaster relief. Her Majesty held a glimmer of hope and wanted to ask Yang Yi about the Turkic affairs. However, she did not think that Yang Yi could give her a satisfactory answer. After all, this matter was a major event involving the state system, and it was not so easy to solve. Powerful countries such as Qin, Han, Tang, and Ming did not come up with a good solution. Of course, this was also a test for Yang Yi, which would determine his future height. Yang Yi blinked. Turkic. He touched his chin and then said slowly. I really have a way to get rid of the Turkic people once and for all. Wu Jiao said subconsciously. It doesn't matter if there is no way, huh? Do you have a way? Get rid of the Turkic people once and for all. Her dark eyes widened, and she looked at Yang Yi in astonishment, her rosy lips almost unable to close, and Yang Yi could even see the cute little tongue inside. Yang Yi had some daydreaming in his heart. Her Majesty's little mouth was so annoying. He coughed lightly. Yes, I have a plan. It is not difficult to get rid of the Turks. Wu Jiao's heart was in turmoil. Is this guy just pretending to be mysterious, or does he really have a good plan? She had some expectations in her heart. The Empress waved her hand. All go out. The maids waiting in the palace bowed one after another, and then all left. Only Shangguan Wanner was left here. As the Empress's personal female official, she did not need to avoid suspicion. Shangguan Wanner also looked at Yang Yi with some curiosity. Although she was a woman, she was not inferior to men in terms of intelligence and strategy, otherwise she would not have become the Empress's personal female official. What ability did Yang Hanlin have to dare to say that it was not difficult to solve the Turks? Wu Jiao took a breath and calmed herself down. She looked at Yang Yi, her eyes mixed with curiosity, doubt, and a hint of expectation. Yang Qing, please speak. Yang Yi smiled and stretched out a finger. Actually, it's not difficult to solve this problem. Your Majesty just needs to understand why the Turks went south to plunder. Wu Jiao, Shangguan Wanner fell into deep thought. Why did the Turks go south to plunder? The Empress frowned slightly and said slowly. The Turks are poor and have limited resources. They covet the fertile land of the Central Plains. Whenever their survival is affected, they come to plunder the resources of the Central Plains to feed themselves. That's right. Yang Yi nodded in appreciation. So, we just need to give them a stable living environment. Shangguan Wan'er. Wu Jiao was stunned, and their eyes were full of confusion. Shangguan Wan'er couldn't help but say, "What does Lord Yang mean?" Wu Jiao looked at Yang Yi in confusion. Shangguan Wan'er had already asked her puzzlement. Yang Yi met the gazes of the two. He smiled and said, "The Turkic land is barren and they don't like to grow crops, but it's suitable for raising cattle, sheep and horses, so the Turkic people have developed animal husbandry, and fur is an important trading commodity. We can set up a trading place on the border between the Great Zhou and the Turkic, so that my Central Plains specialties such as silk, tea, and porcelain can be traded with the Turkic people for cattle, sheep, horses and other livestock, and we can exchange what we have with what we don't have, forming a complete trading chain. Then, the Turkic people can get the living materials they need through trading, so why bother to start a war? You know, war is also a waste of financial resources and loss of population." Wu Jiao heard this and suddenly understood. She was shocked. So that's it. She completely understood what Yang Yi said. As long as there is a trading place like what Yang Yi said, the war will gradually disappear. After all, everyone desires a stable and peaceful life. No one wants to fight. Shangguan Wan'er's cold face showed shock. She looked at Yang Yi with admiration. This Lord Yang is really a genius. In just a few words, he solved the problem that the officials in the court could not solve. Wu Jiao clenched her fists, quite excited, pursed her rosy lips, and her dark eyes flickered slightly. What Yang Qing said is deafening. According to what Yang Qing said, the Turks can at least be stable for a long time. I will implement this strategy as the national policy of the Great Zhou. It is not difficult for my Great Zhou to establish a trading place on the border. As long as this strategy is implemented, my Great Zhou will be stable." The Empress looked at her new counselor with great appreciation. He is simply a genius. Compared with those people in the court, those people are simply good for nothings. Yang Yi shook his head. "Your Majesty misunderstood. My strategy is not like this." Shangguan Wan'er. Wu Jiao. "No, didn't you offer this strategy? Why did you suddenly say it was not like this?" The two looked at each other in bewilderment. Wu Jiao's beautiful phoenix eyebrows slightly frowned, her rosy lips were almost pressed into a line, and a trace of confusion appeared in her majestic and cold phoenix eyes. "What do you mean, Yang Qing?" The high and mighty, cold and noble Empress showed such a little girl's attitude, which made Yang Yi's heart slightly shaken. It was a real contrast. "I just don't know how charming this majestic Empress is in bed." Yang Yi muttered in his heart. His face was stern and serious. "Your Majesty, what I am talking about is to solve the Turks once and for all, not to coexist peacefully with the Turks." The palace suddenly became quiet. Shangguan Wan'er and Wu Jiao looked at each other, and both saw the astonishment in each other's eyes. They didn't react until now. Their understanding of once and for all seems to be different from what Yang Yi wants to express. Wu Jiao was silent for a moment, and her eyes raised. "So what do you mean by once and for all solving the Turks?" Yang Yi stretched out his palm and cut it horizontally. "Of course, it is to cut off the Turks' luck, completely defeat the Turkic Khanate, and make the word Turk disappear from this world, leaving only in the history books." Quiet. The silence in the hall seemed to be able to hear the breathing of the two people. Wu Jiao's heart was shaken, like a sea turning upside down. Her white and slender palms clenched into fists involuntarily, and the delicate skin like porcelain faintly revealed the veins of the meridians, showing the excitement of the Empress. Make the Turks disappear completely. This is not only a stable border, but also an achievement of expanding territory. No emperor can refuse. Wu Jiao certainly thought about crushing the Turks, but this idea was just a fantasy in the middle of the night. Even the Tang dynasty couldn't crush the Turks, how could her Great Zhou do it? But now, this new Zongshu Sharon actually told her that he wanted to make the word Turks disappear from the world and only remain in the history books. If it were someone else, Her Majesty the Empress would only sneer. But, Yang Yi's words, she couldn't help but have a little expectation. Even she knew that it would be harder than ascending to heaven to do this. Wu Jiao pondered for a moment. Then your strategy just now is. Yang Yi smiled slightly. That's part of the strategy, I haven't finished yet. Your Majesty, do you know what the situation will be after this trading chain is formed? Wu Jiao raised her eyebrows slightly, thought hard for a moment, and asked tentatively. The two countries depend on each other. Yang Yi smiled and clapped his hands. Yes, that's right. Economic exchange will allow the two countries to form a certain supply and demand relationship. Please think about it, Your Majesty. If the Great Zhou trades with the Turks and only buys sheepskins at a high price, what will happen? Wu Zhao, Shangguan Wan'er was stunned and fell into deep thought. After a moment, Wu Zhao hesitated. Then the Turks will raise goats on a large scale because sheepskins can be sold for money. Yang Yi raised his eyebrows. Yes, although cattle and sheep are livestock raised by nomadic peoples on the grasslands, sheep are different from cattle. They will eat grass roots when they eat grass. Once the Turks raise sheep in large numbers and graze them constantly, the Turks' pastures will be exhausted. Secondly, when the Turks form a supply-demand relationship with the Great Zhou, one day, when 90% of the Turks no longer raise cattle and horses, but raise sheep to sell for money, the Great Zhou suddenly stops or even prohibits the purchase of Turkic sheepskins. What should the Turks do? After he finished speaking, the hall suddenly became quiet. The Empress felt a gust of cold wind for no reason, and her back was chilly. She instantly realized the viciousness of Yang Yi's plan, and her black and white eyes showed shock and horror. By then, the Turkic goats will be everywhere, with nowhere to sell them, the grasslands will be exhausted, the grassland grazing life will completely collapse, the people will starve to death, and the Turkic will collapse without a fight. Yang Yi nodded, and said calmly, "That's right. Once you rely on other countries economically, you will be easily controlled by others. And by then, my Great Zhou will only need to issue a decree to turn the peaceful and prosperous Turkic Khanate upside down, and turn it into a purgatory on earth. My Great Zhou will reorganize the troops and go straight to Wonglong and take down the Turkic in one fell swoop. For nomadic countries like the Turkic, once the grassland economy collapses, even gods cannot save it. This is the real purpose of his plan. Who wants to be friends with the Turkic people? You covet my money, but I want your life." Wu Zhao and Shangguan Wan'er were sweating coldly on their backs. They took a deep breath secretly, unable to suppress the shock in their hearts. Even if they didn't face such a strategy directly, they could feel its cruelty and bloodiness just by watching from the side. One strategy for a whole country. This is a real plan to wipe out a family. This Yang Yi is really a living devil. The silence in the palace seemed to be so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Shangguan Wan'er seemed to be able to hear her own heartbeat. She looked at Yang Yi with her clear eyes, with a complex look, and a hint of awe in her admiration. She never expected that this young and handsome champion would come up with such a terrible plan to wipe out the whole family. Too cruel. Her Majesty's expression was complicated. She glanced at Yang Yi and muttered to herself. Her champion looked harmless and handsome, but this plan was too vicious. Once this plan was implemented, the Turkic people would lose their only economic income after raising goats, and there would be widespread grief and starvation. This plan would kill at least tens of thousands of people. She originally thought that her methods were extremely cruel. After all, as a woman, she had to be cruel to sit on the throne of the emperor. Unexpectedly, Yang Yi was even more cruel. Compared with Yang Yi, she was simply a great good person. Wu Zhao was silent for a while. Her cold eyes looked at Yang Yi. This strategy is a brilliant one. Although it is vicious, it is useful. It even has a high probability of success. Yang Yi said with a smile. This strategy seems sinister, but it is actually an open strategy. As long as it is implemented properly, the Turks will suffer heavy losses, or even die at the hands of our Great Zhou. By then, Your Majesty will have the merit of expanding the territory. These words immediately pleased Her Majesty the Empress. Wu Zhao raised her eyebrows. I already know Yang Qing's strategy, and I must let people implement it completely and accurately. First, let the Turks form a stable trading market with our Great Zhou, and when they rely on our Great Zhou, we will buy sheepskin at a high price, and finally let them make it for us. Yang Yi smiled. Your Majesty, the Turks are now powerful, and I am afraid that there is little chance of getting them to settle down and have a trading market with us. Wu Zhao was stunned. What does Yang Qing mean? Yang Yi said righteously. Wolves won't do business with sheep unless we give them a punch and let them know that we are not easy to mess with. Wu Zhao was speechless. Yang Yi's meaning couldn't be more obvious. And it was also true. If the Great Zhou was weak and could be bullied, why should we ask the other party to trade fairly with you? Her long eyelashes trembled slightly, and her black and bright eyes glanced at the smiling Yang Yi, and suddenly reacted. Yang Qing has a way to make the Turks suffer heavy losses on the battlefield. Yang Yi said with a smile. Whether it will cause heavy losses to the Turks, I don't know. But I can guarantee that these Turks will be defeated. Let them know that the Great Zhou is not so easy to bully. They will understand that compared to fighting, honestly trading with the Great Zhou is the way to survive. Wu Zhao's black eyes suddenly became sparkling. A trace of curiosity flashed across her cold and fair face. Yang Qing, what's the evil, what's the good plan? Yang Yi was speechless. It's only been a short time, and the Empress has a stereotype of him. He's not really evil, just a little mean. He cupped his hands. Your Majesty, I need to prepare this plan, and I'll demonstrate it to Your Majesty tomorrow. Wu Zhao's mouth twitched. Is this guy still keeping it a secret? She suppressed her curiosity and nodded calmly. Then I'll wait for your performance tomorrow. After leaving the palace, Yang Yi returned to his room. As a court official, although his family was poor, it was not a problem for him to have his own house. His family only had a few servants, and no one else. The main theme was simplicity. Actually, it was because he had no money. After all, how much was the monthly salary for working in the Hanlin Academy? But now that he was with the Empress, money was secondary. The main thing was that he could show his talent, which was the key. Inside the house, Yang Yi opened the system. Host, Yang Yi. Poisoner value, 46,729. Just by offering 3 strategies, he had contributed so many poisoner values. The most was the poisoner value that was fed back during the disaster relief. After all, it was not a ruthless person who could not mix sand in the relief food for the victims. Yang Yi nodded with satisfaction and then opened the system store. Red Cannon design drawing, 150,000 poison warrior value. Big Snow Dragon Rider 1,000, 200,000 poison warrior value. 2 Sleeves Green Snake Secret Book, 500,000 poison warrior value. Flintlock Gun design drawing, 150,000 poison warrior value. Sweat-Blooded Horse 110,000 poison warrior value. Empress Wu Zetian's Bellyband, 1,000 poison warrior value. Quest Summoning Card, Diao Chan, 100,000 poison warrior value. Reba Black Silk, 1,000 poison warrior value. Han Hong Custom Doll, 1,000 poison warrior value. The goods inside are dazzling. Yang Yi's eyes passed over goods such as bellybands and black silk, and his eyes twitched. It is worthy of being a system, it is indeed all-encompassing. He sighed slightly. However, the goods inside seem to be quite expensive, and the poison warrior values he has accumulated are not enough. He studied it for a while, then put away the system. The next day, on the martial arts field, many officials stopped here one after another. Minister Liu, His Majesty summoned the ministers here today. I wonder if Minister Liu knows the inside story. I don't know either. Didn't you hear any rumors? I heard that Yang Yi was summoned by His Majesty after the court meeting yesterday and was also appointed as the secretary of the Central Secretariat. Could today's incident be related to Yang Yi? Related to him? If so, His Majesty really values him. Yes, this boy solved the disaster relief issue, and his talent should not be underestimated. I wonder what he is going to do today. Shish, Minister Li is here. Quote. Everyone stopped talking tacitly. Li Yifu walked in expressionlessly. He was a little annoyed. He also didn't know why the Empress summoned the ministers to the martial arts field today. As a confidant minister, he knew more or less about the Empress's thoughts in the past. Unexpectedly, today, he also rushed here in confusion. On the way, he heard vaguely that it seemed to be related to Yang Yi, and his face became even darker. He regarded himself as the confidant of the Empress, but he didn't expect that he would be robbed of the limelight by a young boy now. Many officials soon gathered around Li Yifu. His face looked better and he began to be polite. After a while, the Empress came late. Your Majesty is here. The ministers saluted respectfully. Wu Zhao nodded slightly and looked at everyone on the scene. Where is Yang Qing? Everyone was startled. Today's anomaly was indeed related to Yang Yi. Shengguan Wanner, who had been waiting here for a long time, said hurriedly. Reporting to Your Majesty, Lord Yang said that he was taking some things and would be here later. Everyone was stunned. Take something. What is Yang Yi going to do? Li Yifu frowned upon hearing this, and couldn't help but be sarcastic. This Lord Yang is so powerful that he actually wants your majesty to wait for him. Everyone looked at each other with different expressions. It was not just Li Yifu who had such thoughts. They were the same. Those who could stand here were all heavyweight officials of the Great Zhou, and the worst were also local officials. A 7th-rank Zongshu Sharon asked them to wait with the emperor. He was really bold. Shangguan Wan'er pursed her lips and looked at the Empress. Wu Jiao sat on the imperial carriage, and her cold and noble face was calm. Her majestic voice sounded and echoed in everyone's ears. All waiting, the Empress said, and then stopped talking. Li Yifu's face flushed, as if he had been slapped hard in the face. He clenched his fists and hated Yang Yi. Everyone was shocked. Her Majesty the Empress is openly supporting Yang Yi. Even the Emperor doesn't care about waiting, what else can they say? At that moment, everyone was silent and waited obediently. After a while, Yang Yi came in with a group of strong men carrying wooden barrels. Click, click, a total of 5 half-person high wooden barrels were placed on the ground and covered tightly. Yang Yi bowed to the Empress. Your Majesty, what I said is that the strategy that can make the Turks suffer losses and setbacks is here. As soon as he said this, the scene suddenly became a commotion. Everyone looked stunned. They finally understood why the Empress summoned them all here, and why they had to wait for Yang Yi. This kid actually has a way to deal with the harassment of the Turks on the border. Li Yifu narrowed his eyes, and a cold light flashed. He never expected that Yang Yi would quietly recommend to the Empress a way to deal with the Turks. If you don't pay attention to this kid, he will cause a big trouble. The Turks like to go south to plunder border cities, which has always been the top priority of the Central Plains countries. Not to mention their Great Zhou, which of the neighboring countries such as Tang and Ming is not invaded. Can this kid handle it? Li Yifu said lightly. We naturally know that Lord Yang has a heart to serve the country, but the Turks are not easy to deal with. If Lord Yang treats the Turks as victims of disasters, it is very likely that he will make a mistake. The other officials also had a hint of disdain, and many people even whispered. The Turks are so brutal that even Emperor Li Shimin of the Tang dynasty suffered from them. Yang Yi is a little too conceited. Yes, many famous generals dare not say that they can definitely defeat the brutal Turks. Yang Yi is too young. Young people are courageous, but courage alone is useless. They also need strength. Quote. Everyone is not optimistic about Yang Yi. If the Turks are so easy to deal with, can they still cause headaches for the Central Plains countries? This kid underestimates the world. Yang Yi smiled slightly, as if he didn't care about Li Yifu's words at all. I will remember the advice of Minister Li. But, just because the Turks are powerful and the success or failure is related to our official hats, we can only shrink back. Eat the emperor's salary. Worry about the emperor's worries. Even if the horse stumbles, it is better than being a turtle with a shrinking head. Puff. Shangguan Wan'er couldn't help laughing, but she soon realized that she had lost her composure and quickly covered her mouth. There was still a hint of smile in her cold eyes as she looked at Yang Yi. This Lord Yang, scolding people is really fun. Li Yifu's face turned green and white. He saw black waves in front of his eyes. How many years have passed? Since he entered the officialdom, no one dared to be presumptuous in front of him. This kid actually dared to call him a coward. What a fool. Many officials on the scene were also holding back their laughter. Although they didn't think highly of Yang Yi, they didn't have a cold for Li Yifu, the arrogant and domineering official. Seeing Li Yifu being humiliated, they couldn't help laughing. Inside the imperial carriage, Wu Jiao's rosy lips curled up slightly. She said lightly, Okay, stop arguing, Yang Qing, the strategy you mentioned to defeat the enemy is to rely on the barrels behind you. Her words made everyone's eyes fall on the barrel. They were all a little curious. What is in it? Yang Yi cupped his hands. Reporting to your majesty, that's right. The things in this barrel are enough to increase our chances of winning when facing the Turks. Li Yifu snorted. You are being mysterious. Do you know how difficult it is to deal with the Turks? Just relying on a few barrels can defeat the enemy. If it really works, I will eat this barrel. Yang Yi pulled the corner of his mouth, looking weird. Li Shangshu, are you sure? Li Yifu glanced at him and sneered in his heart. He didn't believe that a young man who had never been on the battlefield would have a way to make the Turks lose. Of course, I am sure. Yang Yi nodded. This old guy is really cruel. He said calmly. In this case, please ask Minister Li to open the lid of this wooden barrel. The things inside are the strange things that can be used to defend the city against the Turks. Everyone looked curious. Shangguan Wanner couldn't help but stand on tiptoe. Even Wu Jiao in the imperial carriage couldn't help but straighten her back slightly, wanting to take a look at the things in the wooden barrel. Li Yifu frowned, wondering what this kid was doing. But he was sure that this kid couldn't succeed. It was nothing more than some strange tricks. He still wanted to rely on these things to deal with the Turks. He snorted coldly, strode forward, and opened the lid on it. As soon as he opened it, he felt a hot air mixed with a strong stench rushing straight to his face. The scalding hot air instantly burned his skin. Li Yifu screamed, the lid in his hand fell to the ground, and he stepped back a few steps. His reaction immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone present was stunned. What on earth was this? It actually hurt Li Yifu as soon as it was opened. The next moment, a burning smell mixed with a strong stench gradually spread. The gray-haired official closest to the wooden barrel began to retch. He covered his mouth in pain. It's manure. As soon as he said this, everyone around him instantly stepped back, leaving a blank area around the wooden barrel. Everyone present covered their noses and stared at the steaming manure in the wooden barrel. They retched one by one, wishing to spit out all the remaining food in their stomachs. Shangguan Wanner was terrified and quickly hid near Wu Jiao's carriage. This place is quite far away. Wu Jiao's cold and noble face was also speechless. What the hell is this guy doing? Yang Yi covered his nose and waved to the strong man next to him. The strong man quickly closed the lid. The smell was much better. Yang Yi glanced at the officials who were still retching on the field, and his mouth twitched. These people can't bear it very well. After a while, Li Yifu covered his still burning face, his eyes were red, and he almost roared. Yang Yi, is this the trick you said to resist the Turks? Rely on a bucket of manure. This Yang Yi actually asked him to open the lid. The heat of the manure juice almost blinded his eyes. This kid must have done it on purpose. The other officials also covered their noses and shook their heads. It's really nonsense. Just rely on these manures to resist the Turkish cavalry. Alas, young people are just whimsical. Humph, I knew this kid was talking nonsense a long time ago, fortunately I was far away just now. It's ridiculous, the whole court of civil and military officials accompanied him here to watch manure. Too young. Quote. Yang Yi seemed to be unable to see the complaints of the crowd. He smiled slightly, revealing his white teeth. Yes, it depends on this manure juice, to be precise, it is boiled manure juice. Wu Jiao frowned slightly, and some thoughts flashed in her eyes. She noticed Yang Yi's choice of words. Boiled manure juice. Shangguan Wanner blinked, and her cold eyes became strange. Li Yifu was already furious. This kid asked him to open the manure cover, which was simply a loss of face for him. He was the minister of the Ministry of Revenue, and he let this kid play with him. Yang Yi, don't talk nonsense here anymore. This is a family and national affair. How can you play with it? Li Yifu gritted his teeth. Yang Yi faced the questioning eyes of everyone and clapped his hands. I'm afraid that Minister Li has misunderstood. Since I said that this thing has a miraculous effect in repelling the enemy, I will not lie. The feces juice is a dirty thing. After boiling it, it becomes extremely hot. If the enemy army attacks the city, our army only needs to pour this feces juice from the top of the city, and the enemy will be scalded and lose their combat capability. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Yifu couldn't help but sneer. Ridiculous. If you want to scald the enemy, can't you just pour boiling water? Why bother? Besides, even if you scald the enemy, what can you do? It's nothing more than scalding the enemy's skin. Can you kill them? The other officials also nodded secretly. Yeah, what's the use of just relying on scalding? Yes, on the battlefield, scalding is just a minor injury. Yes, Yang Yi's idea is too naive. Quote. Shangguan Wanner frowned. She felt that things were not as simple as Li Yifu said. Yang Yi is not a simple person. She glanced at the Empress quietly and found that Her Majesty was also lost in thought, as if she was thinking about the intention of Yang Yi's action. Yang Yi did not feel doubted at all, he smiled. Li Shangshu is wrong. It's more than just a burn. This thing can take a person's life. The scene was suddenly quiet. Many people looked at Yang Yi in confusion. Li Yifu still sneered. At this time, he was still stubborn. At this time, the Empress's cold voice sounded. Yang Qing, what do you mean? Yang Yi looked serious and bowed to the Empress. Reporting to Your Majesty. As everyone knows, this feces is pickled and dirty. I asked someone to add oil to this feces and cook it over a high fire. This feces juice has a very high temperature. Once it touches a person, it can instantly burn the person's skin. After the burn, the feces juice begins to work. The dirt contained in the feces will enter the human body through the burn wound, and will soon cause the wound to fester, causing the body to contract a serious disease and eventually die. This is a biological weapon. Not to mention the medical conditions on the battlefield, even if it is placed here by the imperial physician in the palace, it is still unclear whether it can save lives. However, the ancients did not understand bacteria, and he could not explain it in detail, so he could only speak with facts. When his voice fell, everyone on the field was stunned. It can actually be used like this. Is it true or not? Does the feces juice have such a miraculous effect? This feces can also make people seriously ill, and is there a highly toxic substance in the feces? Shangguan Wanner's eyes widened. There is actually such a trick. If it is really as majestic as Yang Yi said, then this strategy is too vicious. Wu Jiao was dumbfounded. She was shocked. If it was really as Yang Yi said, it would have such a terrifying power, and it might really become a weapon for defending the city. Li Yifu's face turned black, and he said coldly, Yang Yi, these are just empty words you said, do you have any evidence? He didn't believe it. He had eaten more salt than Yang Yi had eaten rice. He had only heard that people could be drowned by manure, but he had never heard that manure juice could be poisoned to death. Everyone's eyes fell on Yang Yi. Yang Yi smiled slightly. Of course, yesterday, I went to the Tianlao to find a death row prisoner and poured boiling manure juice on him. Today he is dying. After saying that, he clapped his hands, and several soldiers carried up a man in prison clothes, with large areas of burns all over his body and skin ulcerated. Everyone took a look and couldn't help but take a step back. Miserable, it was really too miserable. The prisoner's skin was rotten and covered with herbs. If it weren't for the rise and fall of his chest, they would have thought it was a corpse. At this time, Yang Yi said to the Empress again, Your Majesty, please call the imperial physician from the Imperial Medical Bureau to examine this person. Wu Jiao nodded slightly. Shangguan Wanner beside her hurriedly gave the order. A moment later, a white-haired imperial physician came over. He saluted the Empress. Your Majesty. Wu Jiao nodded slightly and said immediately, Take a look at this person. Can he be saved? The imperial physician nodded respectfully and then walked over to the prisoner to examine him. Everyone present held their breath and looked at the imperial physician intently. A moment later, the imperial physician stood up and shook his head. This man's wound has festered. It seems that he was burned by something, so even if he was given medicine for external injuries, it didn't help. His pulse is disordered, and he seems to have contracted a serious disease. I am not very knowledgeable and can't find out why he was so seriously injured. It is estimated that he will die suddenly in a few days. Hiss. The officials took a breath. They looked at Yang Yi in shock. Even the imperial doctors in the palace couldn't tell for a while, let alone the simple medical conditions on the battlefield. Once contaminated by this boiling dung juice, it is equivalent to waiting for death. For a while, everyone looked at the wooden barrel with a little fear and a little less disdain. This dung is really poisonous. Li Yifu's face turned green, red, and finally pale. He didn't expect that this boiling dung juice could actually kill the enemy. This kid is really not talking nonsense. Didn't he lose face just now? Wait, this guy just asked him to open the lid, and he was choked by a breath of hot air. He won't be poisoned, right? Thinking of this, Li Yifu trembled all over, feeling uncomfortable all over his body. Shangguan Wanner's cold eyes were full of shock. The feces juice really has a miraculous effect. Wu Jiao clenched her fists, looking shocked. This thing can really kill people. If so, those Turks will suffer a great loss when facing the defense of the Great Zhou. No wonder Yang Yi kept saying that he would definitely make those Turks lose. The whole audience was silent. Everyone looked at Yang Yi with extremely shocked eyes. Yang Yi met the eyes of the crowd and smiled slightly. This feces juice not only kills people invisibly, but also makes people fester all over in their last days, like evil spirits, and finally die in pain and struggle. Even under the torture of the disease, beg the former comrades to give themselves a knife to understand their own lives. Even the dirty and smelly feces can be a great insult to people and make people suffer mentally. Soldiers all hope to die on the battlefield. If they are wrapped in feces juice, they will die with their eyes open. In this way, this thing can not only take people's lives, but also deter the enemy and make the enemy terrified. Oh my God, everyone's eyes went dark. This kid's plan is really too vicious. Not only vicious, but also very insidious. No, you are the top scholar, not the living devil. This plan is too vicious. The eyes of the people looking at Yang Yi gradually changed. This kid looks harmless, but he is actually very cruel. Wu Jiao looked at Yang Yi with great appreciation. This plan is very good. Do you have a name for it? You can't just keep calling it dung juice, dung juice. Yang Yi smiled slightly, showing his white teeth. Your Majesty, I will call this golden juice. Everyone looked strange. This name is really appropriate. Isn't it just a bunch of golden dung juice? Wu Jiao rubbed her eyebrows. Very good. With this golden juice, it will not be so easy for the Turks to plunder the border of my Great Zhou again. Yang Yi said seriously. Your Majesty, I actually have another idea. For example, smear this golden juice on the arrowhead, so that when the arrow is shot out and hits the enemy, as long as the enemy's skin is scratched, there is no hope and he will die suddenly. Silence. Everyone looked at Yang Yi in amazement. This dung juice, you can do something fancy. Li Yifu's face twitched. This guy is really insidious. Shangguan Wanner blinked, and couldn't help laughing when she thought of the soldiers on the battlefield covering their noses and shooting arrows. This Lord Yang's idea is really wild. But needless to say, it is indeed very useful. Wu Jiao was silent for a while, and looked at Yang Yi with a strange look. This guy's methods are really cruel. She nodded slightly. With this golden juice as a secret weapon, after the Turks are hurt, they will naturally consider whether it is worth harassing my Great Zhou again. At that time, open the two countries to trade, they are afraid that they will be more than happy. With these two strategies, the Turks can be defeated. Two strategies. Everyone looked confused. Wu Jiao smiled faintly, did not explain, just waved her hand. I am tired. Shangguan Wanner next to him bowed respectfully, and then commanded the guards to carry the imperial carriage away. The curiosity of the people present was aroused by the Empress, but they did not dare to ask if the Empress did not say anything, so they could only look at Yang Yi eagerly. They were very curious about what strategy the Empress said could defeat the Turks. Yang Yi spread his hands and smiled. This is a military secret, so you don't need to ask me. Everyone. Half a month later, Yuzhou City. This is a border city bordering the Turks. Although the city has a small population, it is extremely majestic. The blue-gray walls are built without any gaps. They are straight and smooth. Although they are not high, they are also a dangerous city. On the top of the city. Captain Liu, is this really the secret weapon that His Majesty mentioned in the secret memorial that was sent from afar? A tall, dark-skinned, bearded man looked at the stinking wooden barrel in front of him with a confused look on his face. The boiling manure in it was emitting hot steam. Captain Liu touched the back of his head, and his copper bell-like eyes were quite confused. That should be it. General Heike gave the order. I heard that it was really the strategy of the new champion. The champion also said that the arrowhead could be glued with this golden juice and shot at the enemy. After he finished speaking, the soldiers waiting beside him looked at each other in surprise. Captain Liu, isn't this ridiculous? Just a bucket of feces, can it be used to fight? Yes, this is too childish. Brothers are fighting on the edge of a knife, and a scholar who has never been on the battlefield is giving orders. We are soldiers of the Great Zhou after all. It's a bit embarrassing to throw a bucket of feces at people. How can we be a match for the wolf-like Turks with this feces juice? This champion is just talking nonsense. What does a young boy know about fighting? Quote. Everyone was dissatisfied. They didn't dare to criticize the emperor, so they could only scold Yang Yi. Lieutenant Lu was also quite helpless. He could understand his brother's thoughts. After all, everyone was born and died here. As a result, the rear sent such a thing, saying it was a strategy to defeat the enemy. Isn't this an insult to the brothers? Lieutenant Lu pondered. Everyone, don't be anxious. Even General Heike agreed with this strategy. Presumably, this golden juice has its power. The black-faced man just sneered. I have been fighting for so many years, and I have never heard of winning a battle by relying on feces. I will never use this feces even if I die. His words caused discussions among the people around him. Yes, I will never use this golden juice, what the hell is it? Humph, if I can defeat those Turks with this golden juice, I will eat it. Yes, those Turks are extremely cruel, how could they be afraid of these feces? Anyway, I don't need it, it's too insulting, I think that the champion is just talking nonsense. Yes, a sour scholar, who knows nothing about fighting. Quote. Lieutenant Lu smiled bitterly. He was about to speak, and suddenly he saw a black shadow galloping in the distance from the corner of his eye. His face suddenly became solemn. Stop arguing, the Turks are coming. The soldiers looked solemn and looked into the distance. They saw a large group of Turks riding horses and wearing braids, rushing towards them with greedy eyes. Quick, close the city gate. Someone shouted, and the soldiers at the gate quickly closed the city gate. Not long after, the Turks had rushed to the city gate. They threw out hooks and hooked them on the city wall. These Turks were tall and strong, very fierce. They were already familiar with climbing the city wall. Captain Lu and others changed their faces. Quick, stop them. The soldiers around them took action. They rushed up one by one, picked up stones and threw them down. Bang, bang, bang. Many Turks were hit and fell off the wall, but more were Turkic soldiers who kept climbing up. They could even see the tyranny and greed in the eyes of these Turkic soldiers. The black-faced man next to them exclaimed, "There are not enough stones, hurry up and get weapons." The soldiers next to them picked up their spears and prepared to poke these Turkic soldiers. But these Turkic soldiers were obviously experienced and wore armor. Although some people were poked down, more people were getting closer and closer, and they were obviously about to climb up. According to their trend, the top of the city will be occupied by these Turks in a while. Oops, Captain Lu was furious. These Turks came suddenly, and they didn't even have much preparation. If they let these Turks rush up, the people behind them would suffer. These Turks are inhuman beasts. In a hurry, Captain Lu took a look at the boiling golden juice next to him, gritted his teeth, picked up the big ladle next to him, scooped up a ladle of manure, and poured it under the city wall. In the Turkic army not far from Yuzhou city, surrounded by countless generals, was the Turkic commander K. Tekin. K. Tekin looked at Yuzhou city, which was being climbed by his men, and couldn't help laughing. This time, the Zhou people definitely didn't expect us to attack suddenly. They are already unable to defend. Get ready, we are ready to rush into the city gate at any time. Before he finished speaking, the Turkic soldiers on the city wall in the distance suddenly began to fall down in large numbers, accompanied by bursts of screams. What's going on? K. Tekin held the reins tightly, looking stunned. The other Turkic generals were also shocked. They clearly had the advantage, how could the situation suddenly reverse? At this time, on the city wall, everyone looked at Captain Lu and the ladle in his hand with a confused look on their faces. Captain Lu himself was also shocked. He had nothing to throw away in a hurry, so he could only pick up the ladle and scoop up a large ladle of boiling dung juice. Unexpectedly, the dung juice poured down and instantly burned the skin of the Turkic soldiers, and they couldn't even hold the rope and fell down. Even with armor, they couldn't protect themselves from the watery dung juice. It really works, Captain Lu murmured. Suddenly, a Turkic soldier was about to climb up. Captain Lu reacted with a start, and quickly picked up the ladle to scoop up another large ladle and poured it out fiercely. The Turkic soldier screamed and covered his face, and fell directly from the sky. The soldiers next to him were dumbfounded. This horse really works. The soldiers who were just indignant on their faces hurriedly looked for something to scoop up the golden juice and pour it down. For a while, the boiling golden juice sprayed on the top of the city. These Turkic soldiers screamed one by one, and their skin and flesh were burned. Ah! Countless Turkic soldiers fell down. Many Turkic soldiers fell to death directly. The siege was severely slowed down for a moment. Tekin looked at this scene in shock, glanced at the wailing Turkic soldiers with heartache, and gritted his teeth. Retreat. The enemy obviously had some secret weapons to deal with them. If they continued to attack, they would suffer even more losses. Tekin's order was issued. A large number of Turkic soldiers retreated. Captain Liu made a prompt decision. Shoot. The soldiers behind him reacted immediately and dipped their arrows in gold juice. Although the smell was a bit pungent, it didn't matter as long as they could kill the enemy. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Rounds of arrow rain swept down, covering all the enemies. These Turkic soldiers were only concerned with escaping, so how could they remember to dodge? In the blink of an eye, countless people fell under this rain of arrows. 3 days later, in the Turkic camp, report, General, 60% of our wounded have died, and the remaining ones who are still alive are living a life worse than death. A Turkic general came in with a pale face and reported to Tekin. Tekin's face changed drastically, and his eyes shot out an incredible look. What? Are these military doctors useless? These wounded are just burned and shot by arrows, how can they not be saved? The general hurriedly said. The doctors in the army said that these people's external injuries are trivial, the key is that they have contracted a serious disease, which cannot be cured. Serious disease. Tekin clenched his fists, and a fierce light shot out of his eyes. How can these people be infected with a serious disease? Come on, take me to see. A moment later, Tekin appeared in the tent of the wounded. As soon as he entered, he immediately felt something was wrong. The whole tent was filled with a disgusting stench. Most of the wounded were lying down, breathing in less and breathing out more. If it weren't for the rise and fall of their chests, he would have thought they were all dead. All the wounds of these wounded soldiers were festering, not only pus was flowing, but also bleeding. Tekin was furious. What on earth did these Zhou people do to his soldiers? He grabbed the trembling doctor next to him and roared. What happened? What happened to them? The doctor trembled and said, they must have been poisoned when they were burned, otherwise they would not have contracted a serious disease. Tekin's chest was almost exploded with anger. These Zhou people actually used poison. Do you know what kind of poison it is? Tekin suppressed his anger. The doctor's face became strange. It seems, only feces juice was found on them. What? Tekin was stunned. Feces juice. His invincible army was actually defeated by feces. The tragic defeat of the Turks was soon reported back to Luoyang. In the palace. Good, well done. Wu Jiao slapped her fair and slender hands on the table, and her fair and plump breasts trembled, attracting Yang Yi's attention. Her Majesty's black and white eyes were full of excitement. After so long, the Turks finally suffered a big loss. According to the intelligence from the front line, the Turks suffered heavy casualties, and most of them were infected with serious diseases that could not be cured. Yang Qing, you have made a great contribution. In all the years of war between the Great Zhou and the Turks, this was the first time that she felt so happy. It was simply that all the new and old grudges were settled together. It was really proud. Yang Yi smiled. Everything is just the beginning. Your Majesty, why should you be happy about the victory in front of you? What we have to do is to destroy the Turks. Wu Jiao calmed down. The corners of her rosy lips curled up. Yes, you are right. I will destroy the Turks. Haha, they will never think that I will establish a deal with them next, and they will never think that there is a deadly poison hidden under this bowl of honey porridge. Yang Qing, you have made great contributions, how should I reward you? Yang Yi muttered in his heart. Reward, how about you dance for me? Of course, he could only keep these words in his heart, but he said them with great righteousness on his face. I am the Emperor's benefactor, and it is my duty to be loyal to the Emperor and serve the country. Wu Jiao glanced at Yang Yi, who was righteous, and a smile appeared on the corner of her lips. You are young and have already reached the position of Zongshu Sharon. Although this position is not high in rank, it has great power. If you move up further, it will inevitably attract attention. How about this? I heard that you are not married yet, how about I introduce you to a marriage? Yang Yi, he said seriously, Your Majesty, don't joke with me. How can I have a family if the Turks are not destroyed? God knows what kind of woman the Empress will introduce to him. What if she is ugly? Isn't it a mess? Wu Jiao smiled faintly, but did not mention this matter again, but talked about the future trade with the Turks. Half an hour later, Yang Yi left the palace. In the palace, Wu Jiao leaned back on the chair, revealing her snow-white neck. Her faint smile faded, becoming cold and calm. Wanner, what do you think of my proposal just now? Shangguan Wanner on the side smiled. Your Majesty, do you want to match the third princess with Lord Yang? Wu Jiao's lips curled up, and her eyes turned slightly. Yang Yi is talented and comes from a poor family. I feel most at ease holding such a person in my hands. Besides, my little sister is also at the age to get married. I see that Yang Yi looks handsome, so he may not be unsuitable. Shangguan Wanner hesitated to speak. Wu Jiao glanced at her. What's wrong? Shangguan Wanner said cautiously. Your Majesty seems to have reached the right age to get married, and the royal family is quite anxious about your Majesty's marriage. Wu Jiao. She glared at Shangguan Wanner. You dare to make fun of me? Shangguan Wanner pursed her lips and smiled. As a confidant maid who had been with the Empress since childhood, she was not as afraid of the Empress as other palace maids. Wu Jiao was silent for a moment and sneered. I am the king of a country. Marriage is a state affair. How can it be so easy? Shangguan Wanner blinked. In fact, Lord Yang is a few years older than the third princess, and is actually about the same age as your Majesty. Wu Jiao was stunned and rolled her eyes at Shangguan Wanner in anger. I think you are itching for trouble, and you dare to make up stories about me. If I have something with Yang Yi, where will my face be? How can the monarch and the minister be husband and wife? You girl, you are really asking for a fight. Shangguan Wanner pretended to be afraid, but she felt a little strange in her heart. It seems that your Majesty's reaction is not particularly intense. Half a month later, the harassment of the Great Zhou by the Turks gradually slowed down. The killing power of the golden juice was too great, which made them feel afraid. And at this time, the letter from the Empress was put into the hands of the Turkic Khan again. The news that the two countries wanted to trade with each other gradually spread. Another month passed. The border between the two countries had built a commercial market and officially started trade. Tang Dynasty, Chang'an. In the Taiji Hall. In the middle of the hall sat a middle-aged man in a light golden dragon robe. He had a square face, wide ears, a broad forehead, a majestic face, and mottled white temples. Every move was full of the king's aura. You have all heard about the news of the mutual trade between Zhou and Turkic. He smiled. Right below him stood a group of ministers in purple robes and goldfish bags. The leader was quite fat, but his eyes were quite deep. This man was the prime minister of the Tang dynasty, Changsun Wuji. Changsun Wuji said respectfully, Your Majesty, this matter has been widely reported. Li Shimin touched his chin. What do you think? Changsun Wuji pondered for a moment. I think this matter is not that simple. Maybe there is a hidden trick behind it. Li Shimin did not comment and looked at Fang Xuanling on the side. I heard that Zhou state developed a weapon called Jin Juice, which beat the Turks badly. Fang Xuanling looked a little strange. I heard that it was boiled with feces juice, so it was called Jin Juice. After being scalded, the dirty things in the feces juice will cause infection with a serious disease that cannot be cured. Li Shimin frowned. This thing is really poisonous. I wonder who made it. Changsun Wuji hurriedly said. Your Majesty, the person who mixed sand in Zhou State's relief grain and made Jin Juice a while ago was the same person. Li Shimin was shocked when he heard this. You mean, that new champion Yang Yi? The news of Zhou's disaster relief grain being mixed with sand was widely spread a few days ago. He had also heard a little bit about it, and had once praised such a fantastic method. Unexpectedly, Yang Yi actually came up with a new trick. Changsun Wuji nodded. It's him. Li Shimin frowned. This guy is a talent. But his tricks are a bit sinister. Changsun Wuji sighed. Your Majesty, as far as I know, Zhou's current trade with the Turks seems to be facilitated by Yang Yi. Li Shimin's eyes were deep. Using trade as a means to maintain peace between the two countries, this guy can't be underestimated. Changsun Wuji, Fang Xuanling and others looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Li Shimin noticed that they were wrong and said immediately. What's wrong? Changsun Wuji pondered and said, I heard that the Zhou people only bought sheepskin from the Turks at a high price, and didn't want other things. Li Shimin touched his chin. Is there anything strange about this? Changsun Wuji stroked his beard and said seriously. Of course it's strange. If it's just trade, why restrict goods? Li Shimin nodded slightly, and a trace of doubt appeared in his eyes. Yes, it's indeed not right. Auxiliary machine, what do you think? Changsun Wuji pondered for a moment. I discussed with several ministers and came to a terrible conclusion. Li Shimin became interested and raised his eyebrows. What conclusion? Changsun Wuji showed a lingering fear. I suspect that Yang Yi's move is to make the Turkic people's livestock only sheep. And sheep are different from cattle and horses. They eat grass and grass roots together. Therefore, when grazing in a grassland, sheep cannot be over-raised. Otherwise the grassland will be exhausted. Yang Yi's strategy is to let the Turkic people drag themselves to death. The hall suddenly became quiet. Li Shimin showed a look of horror. He stood up suddenly, with a cold look in his eyes. Does this kid want to cut off the roots of the Turks? If it is really as you guessed, it is such a vicious method. Everyone in the hall nodded repeatedly, with a look of sorrow on their faces. Although everyone present was not a kind person, but now guessing Yang Yi's vicious method, there is still a gust of cold wind behind them. This is too cruel. The Turks live on the grassland, but this kid wants to make the grassland dry up. This is simply forcing the Turks into a desperate situation from the root. This kid is only 20 years old, too cruel. Li Shimin took a deep breath. Collect the information about Yang Yi as soon as possible and send it to me. I am really surprised that such a talent appeared in Zhou State. Even he dared not underestimate Yang Yi at this time. Even though he was the emperor of the Tang dynasty and one of the most powerful people in the Central Plains, he was still quite frightened when faced with Yang Yi's plan to wipe out his entire family. It was too scary. If he had to face such a guy one day, he would have trouble sleeping and eating. Anyone who could come up with such a plan to wipe out his entire family was definitely not a good person. Half a month later. Great Zhou. Hey, these merchants are really fools. Wu Jiao slammed the memorial in her hand on the table. Shangguan Wan'er looked at Her Majesty the Empress cautiously. Although she had a good relationship with Her Majesty the Empress, she still knew how to measure her position. Now Her Majesty the Empress was obviously furious, so she naturally didn't dare to say a word. Wu Jiao suppressed her inner irritability and was extremely dissatisfied. I don't know if the feng shui when she ascended the throne was not right. In recent years, natural disasters have occurred frequently in the country. A flood just happened a few months ago, which consumed a lot of food in the warehouse. Now there is a drought in Hangzhou, which is really a headache for her. Wu Jiao suddenly sighed. Could it be that the heavens don't have mercy on our great Zhou? Shangguan Wan'er hurriedly said, Your Majesty, you must not say that. Since Your Majesty ascended the throne, the people of our great Zhou have lived and worked in peace and contentment, and the country is rich and the people are strong. How could it be that the heavens don't have mercy on us? Your Majesty is destined by heaven, and you should cheer up. Wu Jiao rubbed her eyebrows, and a smile appeared on her fair and cold face. You were right. I almost let this group of profit-seeking businessmen go crazy. Pass my oral order. Call all the officials of the 6 ministries and the secretariat. Oh, right. Wu Jiao seemed to remember something. Call Yang Yi over. Shangguan Wan'er nodded respectfully. Yes, Your Majesty. After a moment, the officials of the secretariat and the 6 ministries gathered together. Those who can come here are all bigwigs in the court. Yang Yi glanced at the face of the Empress and muttered in his heart. What happened to the Empress? Although he was a secretary of the secretariat, he did not stay with the Empress most of the time, but stayed in the secretariat to participate in the compilation of the imperial edict. Now that he was suddenly called here by the Empress, something extraordinary must have happened. Wu Jiao glanced at everyone, paused for a moment on Yang Yi, then retracted her gaze and threw the memorial in her hand to them. Take a good look. Everyone passed the memorial to each other, frowning. When Yang Yi finally took the memorial, he was stunned. A drought actually occurred in Hangzhou. The government was seriously short of food and asked the court for help. The price of grain in Hangzhou had increased tenfold at this time, and was rising at a faster rate. Wu Jiao's voice, which was hidden in anger, echoed in the hall. The government doesn't have much food left, and it can only rely on some old grain to support it. However, this group of grain merchants are hoarding goods and working together to drive up the price of grain. The merchants of my Great Zhou are all such a group of profit-seeking blood-sucking worms. How many people in Hangzhou are waiting for rice to eat, but they are hiding the grain and raising the price in various ways. How many people can bear the tenfold increase in grain prices? The people in the hall looked at each other, and no one dared to answer. They didn't expect that Hangzhou would have a drought, and these grain merchants actually worked together to raise the price and make money from the national disaster. This is indeed a bit excessive. Wu Jiao suppressed her anger. A few months ago, due to the flood in the capital, all the grain that the court could mobilize had been mobilized. Now Hangzhou wants to dispatch more grain. I'm afraid it's impossible. Unless the grain is dispatched from the nearest granary near Hangzhou, but it's impossible. She said a little tiredly. Li Yifu, if we dispatch grain from Suzhou, Wuzhou and other places now, how much can we withdraw at most? Chapter 11. Li Yifu pondered for a moment and said slowly. Reporting to your majesty, I am afraid that less than 200,000 shi can be withdrawn. Wu Zhao's eyes went dark. Only 200,000 shi. If it was really this amount, at least half of the people in Hangzhou would starve to death. She swept her cold eyes across the crowd. My dear ministers, what can you do? Everyone in the hall looked at each other. None of them wanted to join in. This situation has reached a desperate situation. What else can the court do without food? Could it be that the grain merchants can be asked to lower the price on their own initiative? Everyone fell into deep thought. Shenghuan Wanner subconsciously looked at Yang Yi, but found that this Lord Yang just had a calm face, as if he was thinking, and had no intention of standing up. After a while, a pale-haired old man said with a smile, Your Majesty, the court may use fame as bait to get the wealthy merchants and gentry in Hangzhou to donate grain and money. As long as they are willing to donate, the court can make the decision and engrave their names on a monument in Hangzhou, which will be passed down through the ages. When his voice fell, the eyes of the people around him lit up. That makes sense. Xu Zongshu's plan is really great. This plan may be effective. Quote. The person who spoke was Zongshuling Xu Jingzong, a veteran who had been up and down in the officialdom for decades. The suggestion was also quite feasible. Shenghuan Wanner could not help but nod slightly. It is not impossible to tempt the wealthy merchants with fame and fortune to donate money. But Wu Jiao shook her head. Not feasible. No matter how many people die, it will not have any impact on these wealthy merchants. Moreover, these grain merchants are most likely the wealthy merchants and gentry in Hangzhou. They originally wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to rob a fortune from the national disaster. How could they give up such a huge benefit just because of the stone tablet you promised? Even if someone is willing to donate, it is just a drop in the bucket. It is still far from enough for the people of Hangzhou. Xu Jingzong paused and couldn't help but smile bitterly. The Empress's words are not without reason. But this is the only solution he can think of. The palace was silent for a while. Li Yifu said slowly, Your Majesty, no matter what, all the grain that can be raised must be sent to Hangzhou first. Let the people of Hangzhou know that the court has not given up on them and appease the restless people first, otherwise the consequences will be disastrous. Everyone nodded when they heard this. Li Yifu's considerations are not unreasonable. After all, in times of famine, the most important thing is that the government should give the people confidence. Otherwise, the people's hearts will be unstable and problems will easily arise. Just then, Yang Yi's voice suddenly sounded. No. Swish, swish, swish. Everyone's eyes fell on Yang Yi, with a look of astonishment. They didn't expect Yang Yi to stand up and oppose it directly. Shenghuan Wanner was also a little stunned. She felt that Li Yifu's proposal seemed to have no problem. Could it be that Yang Yi opposed it because of the grudge between the two? Xu Jingzong glanced at Yang Yi thoughtfully. He was still quite curious about this junior of the secretariat. Li Yifu on the side had an ugly look on his face. This kid just likes to go against him, right? He narrowed his eyes and spoke sternly. What does Yang Sharon mean? Is my proposal not acceptable? Do you want to let the people of Hangzhou starve? If something happens, can you take responsibility? This is not the same as you mixing sand with porridge, don't talk nonsense. He was still upset about Yang Yi's last disaster relief, and now he had found an opportunity to play a trick on Yang Yi. Yang Yi smiled, seemingly unaffected, making Li Yifu feel like he had punched cotton, and he was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. Wu Jiao frowned slightly, her eyes were on Yang Yi, and her voice couldn't help but become much gentler. What does Yang Qing mean? Just say it. Yang Yi cupped his hands. Your Majesty, I think that in the current situation of food shortage, we must not put all the food in Hangzhou. Otherwise, if the food is eaten up in a short period of time and there is no supply afterwards, wouldn't it tell the people of Hangzhou that the court has no more food? At that time, people's hearts will really be unsettled. If someone with ulterior motives incites, it will be a disaster. The hall was dead silent. Everyone heard the words, and their eyes showed a thoughtful look, and they nodded involuntarily. What Yang Yi said makes sense. If the food cannot be provided at that time, the people will inevitably lose confidence in the court. The situation is very dangerous. Shangguan Wanner's eyes showed a clear look. So that's it. Lord Yang is indeed far-sighted. Wu Jiao was silent. Yang Yi said the crux of the problem. Food shortage is fatal. Li Yifu was very unhappy. He made a suggestion and was rejected by Yang Yi, which made him lose face. Compared with the last disaster relief, he already seemed inferior to Yang Yi. Now he is arguing with him again. He gritted his teeth. Then transport it to Hangzhou in batches. In this way, although the food will be less each time, it can also give hope for the future. Yang Yi said without hesitation, it still doesn't work. Every time there is not enough food, many people will starve to death. Li Yifu's face flushed with anger, and his eyes bulged. It's better to starve some people to death than to starve most of them to death. Yang Yi shook his head. Li Shangshu said it so lightly. The starvation of some people you mentioned may be tens of thousands of people, affecting hundreds of thousands of families. For Li Shangshu, the drought in Hangzhou may be a few words recorded in history books in the future, but for the people of Hangzhou, it is an extremely heavy disaster. A speck of dust in the air is a mountain for the people. The hall was extremely quiet. Everyone was shocked by Yang Yi's words. A speck of dust in the air is a mountain for the people. Wu Jiao chewed on this sentence silently, and her phoenix eyes flickered slightly. The eyes of other officials looking at Yang Yi also gradually changed. This boy can actually say such profound words, his mind is extraordinary. Shangguan Wanner's cold eyes flashed with admiration. As the maid of the Empress and the head of the palace women, she has come into contact with too many dignitaries. In the eyes of these nobles, the lives of ordinary people are just numbers, not worth mentioning. But in the eyes of Lord Yang, it seems to be particularly different. Li Yifu's people are going to be numb. This fool pretends to be a saint, and he must be stepped on. 2. The anger in his heart almost burned his reason. Li Yifu suppressed his inner anger and said coldly, "This won't work, that won't work, then please ask Lord Yang to come up with a clever plan for me to see." Everyone's eyes fell on Yang Yi, with different expressions. What Li Yifu said made sense. Everything should be based on solving the problem. It's useless to just talk. Wu Jiao looked at Yang Yi expectantly. She couldn't help but straighten her waist slightly, and her black and white eyes were shining. Yang Yi's mouth twitched. He cupped his hands and smiled. Of course there is such a way. Oh, Wu Jiao's eyes lit up. Mr. Yang, please tell me. Yang Yi said seriously, I think the first step to solve the crisis in Hangzhou is for the court to raise the price of grain. Silence. The silence in the hall was scary. Everyone stared at Yang Yi in amazement. They had only one thought in their minds. Is this kid crazy? Li Yifu looked strange. Good guy, he thought this guy had some tricks, and he came here to make trouble after making a fuss for a long time. The price of grain is already high enough now, and he still wants to raise the price of grain. You are forcing the people to death. I have seen many living bodhisattvas, but this is the first time I have seen a living king of hell. Wu Jiao's eyes twitched. She was silent for a long time before she spoke with some difficulty. Yang Qing, are you mistaken? We want to save these people, not to force them to death. Shangguan Wanner was also dumbfounded. Lord Yang must be joking. The grain merchants are raising prices now, which has caused public resentment. If they really raise the prices further, the court will be scolded. The smile on Yang Yi's face became more and more intense. Reporting to Your Majesty, I want to save these people. And the first step to save these people is to raise the price of grain. Li Yifu sneered, his sharp eyes seemed to pierce into Yang Yi's eyes. Mr. Yang, do you know that the current grain price is 10 times higher than before? If you raise the grain price further, do you know what the consequences will be? The other officials also nodded secretly, looking at Yang Yi with disappointment. I thought this kid had some brilliant ideas, but I didn't expect that he was just talking nonsense. The prices of goods related to food, clothing, housing and transportation generally tend to be stable, and the fluctuation of prices also measures the situation of the domestic economy. The tenfold increase in grain prices has already made it difficult for the people to make a living. If it continues to rise like this, the people may rise up. Yang Yi did not care about Li Yifu's sarcasm and said with a smile. The consequence is that the grain merchants are ecstatic. Everyone was confused. You still know. If the grain merchants are happy, can the people have a good life? The more Wu Jiao thought about it, the more wrong it was. Yang Yi's plan seemed to be a mess. Her face became serious. Yang Yi, the situation in Hangzhou is very complicated, don't mess around. No matter how much she admired Yang Yi, she couldn't let him do whatever he wanted at this moment. If this continued, the people of Hangzhou would revolt. Yang Yi spread his hands helplessly. Your Majesty, I am not messing around. The court not only wants to buy grain at a high price, but also close the granary and stop issuing relief grain. Silence. Many officials gasped, looking shocked. They thought that they were cruel enough to exploit the people occasionally. They didn't expect Yang Yi to be even crueler. Not only did he raise the price of grain, but he also stopped distributing relief grain. Isn't this just forcing the people to death? Li Yifu's eyes widened. Is this kid going to starve all the people in the city to death? Or is he going to force these people to rebel? Shangguan Wanner's dark eyes widened. She even doubted whether Yang Yi was crazy now. Is this okay? Wu Jiao's forehead was throbbing. Has this kid been a little arrogant recently? What kind of a lousy plan is this? She raised her eyebrows, her tone was angry. Yang Yi, what's the use of doing this, except making those profiteers happy and the people complaining? Everyone nodded involuntarily. Li Yifu narrowed his eyes, revealing a gloating look. Before he could make a move, this guy dug his own grave. God has opened his eyes. Yang Yi was not panicked at all and said with a smile. Why are grain merchants hoarding goods at high prices? Now the price of grain is 10 times higher than before, from 5 coins a bucket to 50 coins a bucket. Don't say grain merchants, even I am jealous. If the court continues to purchase grain at 60 coins a bucket and closes the relief grain, the grain in Hangzhou will be close to the highest price in the history of my great Zhou, and it may even reach 200 coins a bucket. Such a high price will inevitably be accompanied by a speed that sweeps across the country, making grain merchants from all over the country jealous. Merchants are profit-driven. They sell 5 or 6 coins a bucket locally, but they can sell hundreds of coins a bucket in Hangzhou, which is dozens of times the profit. It would be strange if they are not tempted. At that time, grain merchants from all over the country will definitely come here after hearing the news. In their eyes, Hangzhou is already a big piece of fat meat. Everyone frowned and nodded slightly. Yang Yi's analysis is quite reasonable. But it seems useless. The price is so high that ordinary people can't afford it. Li Yifu sneered. What's the point of making rats fatter? Yang Yi glanced at Li Yifu, and a smile appeared on his lips. Li Shengshu is the Minister of Revenue after all, but he is not sensitive to the economy at all. I don't know what's the point of being the Minister of Revenue. He is just a celibate. What do you mean? Li Yifu's face flushed red, and he pointed at Yang Yi with trembling fingers, almost fainting from anger. Yang Yi faced the eyes of everyone with different expressions, smiled slightly, showing his white teeth, like a man-eating tiger showing its fangs. Grain merchants from all over the country brought a large amount of grain to Hangzhou. If the court suddenly announced that it would stop purchasing grain at high prices, without the court's purchase, the people could not afford the high-priced grain. How could these grain merchants sell the grain they brought? At this moment, the court will release all the grain it had purchased before and open the warehouse to release the grain. Even if the grain for disaster relief is not much, as long as it can ensure that they will not starve to death and survive for a few more days, will there be people willing to buy the grain from the grain merchants who came after hearing the news at a high price? At that time, grain merchants from all over the country stored a large amount of grain and sat on cargo ships at the Hangzhou docks but could not sell the goods. But if they left directly, they would lose a lot of transportation costs. How could they be willing? In this way, the court will take the lead and gather grain merchants from all over the country. The court is willing to purchase their grain at a price of 6 coins per bucket to help them break even. Most of them will never be unwilling, because if they return without selling a penny, they will lose more. At least if they sell it to the government at a low price, they can still reduce losses. In this way, the government will have a large amount of low-priced grain, and then sell all of this low-priced grain to the people. At that time, a large amount of low-priced grain will flood into the Hangzhou market, and the grain price in Hangzhou will inevitably be like an avalanche, from hundreds of coins per bucket to a few coins per bucket. Those profiteers in Hangzhou who raise prices and work together to drive up prices will inevitably be unable to sit still and can only follow the price reduction. Even if they are bleeding in their hearts due to losses, they have to do so, because if they don't sell now, the grain they bought at a high price will all rot in their hands. At that time, there will be no need to worry about the shortage of grain in Hangzhou, and the prices will all return to the previous low prices, or even lower, and the people can afford it. May I ask you, can this strategy break the crisis in Hangzhou? There was a dead silence in the hall. Everyone was dumbfounded and shocked. Unbelievable, simply incredible. The officials were so shocked that they trembled all over and their scalps went numb. They never expected that Yang Yi's strategy, which seemed to force the people to death, would turn around and force those unscrupulous profiteers to death. Too cruel. This strategy is really amazing. They couldn't help but be shocked, looking at Yang Yi in horror, and a trace of fear in their hearts. When this kid wants to calculate people, he will trap them to death. Those profiteers will probably be trapped to death by Yang Yi this time. Li Yifu's hair was numb, his body trembled involuntarily, and a look of shock appeared on his face that he himself didn't know. Yang Yi's words were like a flash of lightning that broke through the dark clouds above Hangzhou, and instantly woke him up. This strategy is really amazing. Taking advantage of the greed of these profiteers, setting up a trap to trap them to death. Not only did it trap a wave of profiteers, but it also solved the crisis that the people couldn't afford the sky-high price of food. It is simply a great strategy for the ages. Even though he hated Yang Yi very much, he had to admit that Yang Yi's strategy was beyond his reach. Shangguan Wanner clenched her fists, and her cold eyes showed shock. She didn't expect that Yang Yi's strategy would solve the problem as soon as he talked about it. She didn't expect that there was such a plan behind raising the price of grain. Taking advantage of human greed, he severely cheated those profiteers. It was too bad. However, it was really refreshing. Wu Jiao frowned tightly, her black and white eyes seemed to be shocked, and her rosy lips were tightly pursed. She thought Yang Yi was fooling around, but she didn't expect that he would solve the problem that troubled them in a blink of an eye. Her Majesty the Queen patted the dragon throne with some excitement. Good, it's a great plan. These profiteers must be severely cheated. She hated these profiteers. Now that Yang Yi's plan helped her vent her anger, it couldn't be better. Thinking of how she had just misunderstood Yang Yi, she felt a little guilty. At that moment, the Empress said in a deep voice, "Yang Qing, since you have come up with such a brilliant plan, why don't you take charge of the disaster relief in Hangzhou this time?" Yang Yi gladly accepted the order. "Yes, Your Majesty." He glanced at the system panel. Host, Yang Yi. Poisoner value, 51,439. Poisoner value has increased a lot. However, it is not fast enough to just offer suggestions here. If he personally presides over this plan, it is estimated that it can increase again. The civil and military officials on the side looked at Yang Yi with envy. This Lord Yang really caught the Empress's eye. But he also has real skills, which is beyond envy. Li Yifu's face turned black. He was just scolded by Yang Yi. After the argument, he couldn't bear it anymore and asked Yang Yi to come up with a plan. As a result, Yang Yi came up with a vicious plan, which could not only solve the problem of high grain prices but also severely punish those profiteers. It was perfect. This was a slap in his face. He was so frustrated that he almost vomited blood. But it was obvious that the Empress now valued Yang Yi very much, so he could only endure it. The next day, Yang Yi set off for Hangzhou. As an imperial envoy, the first thing he did after arriving in Hangzhou was to purchase grain at a price higher than the market price and stop issuing disaster relief grain. When this news came out, it was like an earthquake, which completely put Hangzhou on the cusp of the storm. In Hangzhou City, in front of the government office. This dog official is going to kill us all. Yes, I am an old man with a poor family background. It hurts to buy rice. Now, this dog official has come and the price has increased. I am going to lose my coffin. This dog official must be colluding with those unscrupulous profiteers. It's so abominable. This dog official, get out. The government stopped issuing relief food. Are they going to force people to death? Quote. Hundreds of people stood in front of the government office and cursed angrily. But the government office was always closed. An old man spat fiercely and shouted with great disgust. Dog official, you are colluding with profiteers. You will be punished by God sooner or later. His words resonated with everyone. Everyone cursed angrily. Dog official, beast, God thing, asshole. Quote. Countless people cursed here for several days, but the government never responded. At this time, the price of grain has been rising steadily, even close to 150 coins per bucket, and it is still rising. Many people sighed. Without the government's disaster relief grain, they were extremely distressed when buying grain, and their lives were very tight. Often hungry people ran to the government office to vent their anger. The government office was in a mess. Inside the government office, all the petty officials were silent. No one dared to get rid of the bad luck of the imperial envoy. Inside the house, Yang Yi was contented, and did not look as angry as those officials imagined. He smiled at the skyrocketing poison value, and his heart was full of joy. Good, when the plan is over, those grain merchants can contribute to him again. A few days later, the price of grain has climbed to 200 coins per bucket, reaching its peak. Many grain merchants from other places have heard the news and come here, wanting to make a fortune in the national disaster. In Hangzhou City, a group of grain merchants gathered together. They looked smug. I don't know if this imperial envoy has lost his mind or what. He actually bought grain at a high price. Yes, the grain price is several times higher than before, and we can make a lot of money from the grain we stockpiled. Haha, if it weren't for this imperial envoy, the grain price wouldn't be so high. Even I doubt whether he is one of us. Haha, let's continue to buy grain, the price will still rise. This drought will make the people's coffins empty. Quote. Mansion. Sir, in recent days, many grain ships from other places have stopped at the dock. A clerk said cautiously. Yang Yi raised his eyebrows. Keep observing, and tell me when the dock is full. Yes, the clerk didn't understand, but still did it. 3 days later. Sir, the dock can no longer hold any more ships, and there are grain merchants' cargo ships everywhere. The clerk said respectfully. Yang Yi raised his eyebrows and smiled. Pass on my order to stop purchasing any grain. In addition, open the granary and release grain to help the people. The clerk responded, then froze and looked at Yang Yi in surprise. He was confused, and he didn't expect that the imperial envoy didn't care about the lives of the people 2 days ago and didn't release grain at all. Why did he suddenly start releasing grain today? He didn't understand the imperial envoy's approach at all, so he had to do it honestly. Half a day later, the government opened the granaries to release grain and stopped purchasing grain, which shocked the whole city. Countless people flocked to receive relief grain. Although the grain was not much, it was enough for them to survive for a while. On the other side, local grain merchants gathered together. What's going on? Why doesn't the imperial envoy collect grain? I have hoarded 800,000 kilograms of grain. If I don't collect it, what should I do with my grain? A middle-aged man with a mustache said in a panic. I have also hoarded a lot. Yes, if it falls on my hands, I will suffer a heavy loss. Hey, I have hoarded more than 1 million kilograms. The others were a little anxious. Don't panic, everyone. When their granaries run out of grain, they will definitely buy it back. An old man sneered. Yes, why are you all so panicked? A fat man said disdainfully. Hangzhou's population is close to 1 million, and the grain purchased by their government is not enough to eat. If they don't want those poor people to revolt, they can only buy our grain. Everyone felt more at ease after hearing this. The fat man sneered, I want to see if this young imperial envoy can turn the world upside down. At this time, at the dock, the grain merchants from other places were confused. Not going to take it. If they don't take it, then why did we come all the way here? It's over. If the government doesn't take it, it will cost us a lot to go back and forth. It's a big loss. It's a big loss. This cargo ship has to pay for every day it's parked at the dock. If I can't sell the grain, I have to pay for it out of my own pocket. Don't worry, the grain the government has bought won't last long. They will definitely buy it again. Well, that's true, but if we stay here one more day, it will cost one more day. I hope the government will buy it quickly. Quote. This went on for half a month. The government didn't make any move. The relief grain was distributed in very small quantities every day, but it never stopped. The local grain merchants could still sit still, but the grain merchants from other places were going crazy. The cargo ship they rented had to pay a lot of fees for every day it moored at the Hangzhou dock. The people at the dock would not be lenient with them. They knew they were here to make money, so they asked for a lot of money. These foreign grain merchants were almost unable to bear it. A group of people gathered at the dock and sighed. For half a month, we stayed here all day. Not only did we not sell half a bucket of rice, but we also had to pay extra mooring fees. We also had to pay a large amount of renting fees when we went back. What should we do? An old man smiled bitterly. A young man next to him had a crying face. You all have some wealth. This time I bet all my wealth to come here and plan to make a lot of money. If I can't make money, my ancestral home will have to be mortgaged to others, and then I'm done. Who knew that the court would suddenly stop collecting grain? How about we sell it to the people in the city? Someone suggested. HMPH, you want to sell it to the people in the city. How? You carry the rice yourself. If you hire someone to go, it will be another expense. Besides, do you think those local grain merchants are easy to mess with? You want to sell it at a low price, but you have to see if you have the ability. A skinny middle-aged man next to him sneered. Everyone was silent. They knew that they seemed to have reached a dead end. If they stayed in Hangzhou any longer, they would probably lose all their money. Even if they go back now, they will lose a lot. Just when everyone was silent, a servant walked in. My dear officials, there is a government official who wants to see you. Everyone was stunned and looked puzzled. Government. They looked at each other for a long time. One person said, please let him in. The servant nodded and left. What is the purpose of this official's visit? One person was a little confused. Everyone was silent. An old man said in a deep voice, no matter what, let's meet first. Everyone nodded immediately. After a moment, an official in a round-necked black robe came in. He looked around and said seriously, it's good that you are all here. The imperial envoy wants to host a banquet for you tomorrow to discuss the purchase of grain. What? Everyone was stunned when they heard it, and then they all showed ecstasy, shaking like sieves, and were so excited that they couldn't help themselves. As long as the government is willing to collect grain, they won't have to lose money anymore. Hope is here. Tang Dynasty, Chang'an, Taiji Hall. Li Shimin touched his chin. Fuji, Xuanling, Lao Du, you guys come and analyze, what exactly is Yang Yi trying to do? This kid inexplicably went to Hangzhou and raised the already high price a lot. The people of Hangzhou have cursed him to death, and now he has started to open the warehouse to release grain. What is going on with such inconsistent and weird behavior? Chengsun Wuji, Du Ruhui, and Fang Xuanling all frowned. For a moment, they couldn't figure out why Yang Yi's actions were so inconsistent. Li Shimin rubbed his eyebrows. Forget it, forget about him, maybe he is also stretched this time. The dilemma in Hangzhou is difficult for anyone to deal with. The next day, many foreign grain merchants gathered in a restaurant in the city. Yang Yi had already prepared a banquet for them. But no one was interested in the banquet. Inside the house, we have seen the imperial envoy. Everyone bowed. Yang Yi nodded slightly, put down the teacup in his hand, and smiled. Please sit down. When everyone sat down anxiously, Yang Yi glanced around and said with a smile, I know why you are here, and I understand that you are anxious, so I won't keep you in suspense. I plan to buy all your grain. But I can't pay at the current market price, but at the previous 5 cents per bucket. What? Everyone was very happy when they heard that Yang Yi was going to buy all their grain at first, but they turned pale when they heard the rest. According to 5 cents per bucket, they are afraid that they will lose a lot. One person had a sad face. Imperial Envoy, we will lose money with these 5 cents. The people around him nodded one after another, showing a miserable look. Yang Yi had no sympathy for them. Although they were not as hateful as the local grain merchants, they were not good people either. They are all just a bunch of losers. Yang Yi just said lightly. If you don't want to, then forget it. I don't have to buy it. It's just, the cost of berthing at Hangzhou Wharf seems to be quite high. Everyone looked grim. Yang Yi was strangling their lifeline. An old man looked grim and forced a smile. My lord the Imperial Envoy, how about raising the price? Yang Yi was unmoved and was about to stand up. Those grain merchants stood up in a hurry and fear. If the Imperial Envoy left, they would be finished. Yang Yi glanced at them. 5 cents a bucket, no negotiation. If you think it's too expensive, then please do as you please. You can barely break even if you sell it to me now. In a few days, 5 cents a bucket, you will all lose money. Everyone, think about it. After he finished speaking, he walked out the door without hesitation, ignoring everyone's requests to stay. Leaving behind the pale-faced, sighing crowd. 3 days later. In the government office, a petty official ran in breathlessly. My lord, the grain merchants have agreed. Yang Yi smiled slightly. It seemed that everything was under control. Send someone to trade with them, buy all their grain, and start selling grain tomorrow at 6 coins per bucket. The petty official looked at Yang Yi with admiration and immediately responded. Yes, sir. The next day, the government began to sell a large amount of low-priced grain. For a time, millions of kilograms of low-priced grain flooded into the Hangzhou market. Crazy, crazy. Countless people rushed into the market like crazy to buy grain. Their eyes were green. After being kidnapped by high-priced grain for so long, and eating low-quality disaster relief grain for a long time, now seeing cheap refined rice, they are like crazy. In the streets and alleys, people carrying rice can be seen everywhere, and they are all happy. In Hangzhou City, local grains gathered together. But everyone looked very ugly at this time. What's going on? How can he have so much grain? I heard that those foreign grain ships have left. It must be sold by foreign grain merchants. Selling at such a low price is going to kill us. It's really over now. The grain we have stored can't be sold at all. What should I do? If I sell it at a low price now, I will lose blood. What can I do if I don't sell it? If I don't sell it, I won't be able to sell it at this price in the future. Hey, sell it quickly. Quote. They sighed, as if the end of the world is coming. Even the calmest one was sweating at this time. This imperial envoy is too cruel. He directly cut off the firewood from the bottom of the pot and roasted them all on the fire. The fat man who had been talking nonsense before was now livid and sweating all over. He said in despair, I'm afraid that this imperial envoy has set up a trap for us since he arrived in Hangzhou. It's too cruel. This imperial envoy is simply a living devil. He wants to skin us alive and take out our savings for many years. The rest of the people were also awakened at this time and suddenly woke up. No wonder this imperial envoy wanted to raise the price of grain at the beginning. From that day on, he calculated the situation today. After figuring this out, everyone was shocked. For a moment, they seemed to have a chill rushing straight from the coccyx to the top of the head, and their hair was numb. It was as if there was an invisible net that enveloped them from beginning to end. No matter how they struggled, they could only lose everything in despair. This imperial envoy was really terrible. He calculated every step of theirs. Even now, they were forced to lower the price. If they don't sell it now, they won't be able to sell it at the price of 6 coins a bucket in a while. Food prices will only keep falling, and it is impossible for them to rise again. This is forcing them to jump off the cliff. Too cruel. Such a strategy can be called an extremely vicious one. After a few days, most of the local grain merchants began to join the ranks of selling grain at low prices. With their participation, the grain price, which was already shaky, began to fall again. It even fell below the initial market price. These local grain merchants were in mourning. They could only swallow their anger and sell the grain at a discount. In the next half a month, the people of Hangzhou bought grain at extremely low prices, and they were ecstatic. I don't know when it started, and the rumor that the sharp drop in grain prices was due to the layout of the imperial envoy. The news about how to raise grain prices, attract foreign grain merchants, and then buy grain at a low price and sell it to them swept Hangzhou like a hurricane. Although Yang Yi did not publicize himself, it does not mean that no smart people can see it at this time. At this time, the people of Hangzhou suddenly realized why the imperial envoy raised the grain price when he first came. In the government office, the clerk ran over in a hurry, panting. "Sir, there are many people outside the government office who want to see you." Yang Yi raised his eyebrows. "To see me?" He closed the system panel. The poison value was still soaring just now, and the local grain merchants should hate him very much now. He pondered for a moment, and then walked out of the government office. These people now have food to eat, so they should not come to scold him as a dog official. After a while, he opened the door of the government office. Looking around, there was a huge crowd outside, with hundreds or thousands of people standing outside. When they saw him coming out, they got excited one by one. The crowd was noisy. The cheers almost lifted the roof of the government office. Yang Yi twitched his mouth. What's going on? He hadn't reacted yet. An old man not far in front of him suddenly knelt down in front of him with a plop. Yang Yi's eyelids jumped, and he quickly helped him up. "Father, what are you doing?" The old man said with a face of shame. "My lord, you saved Hangzhou. I came here to scold you and spit on you. Now I think I was really stupid. I kowtow to you and apologize. I'm sorry." After saying that, he was about to kowtow to the ground. Yang Yi certainly wouldn't do that, and hurriedly stopped him. However, he could stop him, but he couldn't stop the hundreds of people. Countless people kowtowed to him, thanked him, and apologized. "I apologized to you too." "So did I. Hey, I misunderstood the Lord. I will never forget the kindness of the Lord. I will set up a longevity tablet for the Lord." The scene was extremely noisy and full of people. All the people worshipped and looked at the Lord who saved them with admiration. Behind Yang Yi, countless government officials came out and were stunned and shocked when they saw such a grand scene. Everyone's hair was numb and shocked. They have been officials here for so many years, but this is the first time they have seen someone so respected by the people. And Yang Yi only took less than a month. For a while, all the officials looked at Yang Yi's back with admiration. They showed admiration in their eyes. He joined the game with his own body and made a plan to pacify the world. He is really a top-notch counselor. Tang Dynasty. So that's it. Li Shimin said it twice with an unprecedented brilliance in his eyes. He clenched his fists. This person deliberately set up a trap, lured you into the trap, made a feint to the east and attacked in the west, and secretly crossed Shinkang. What a great imperial envoy Yang. This plan not only solved the disaster in Hangzhou, but also made those profiteers lose their fortunes. It's really a brilliant plan to kill several birds with one stone. He was very interested in Yang Yi, so as soon as the Hangzhou matter was resolved, he immediately received the news. Unexpectedly, the situation that had puzzled him before and even made him think that Yang Yi had run out of ideas was reversed in an instant. It was simply amazing and satisfying. In the hall, Fang Xuanling, Du Ruhui, Cheng Sun Wuji and others also took a breath of cold air, with shock on their faces. Incredible, it was simply too incredible. Even they did not expect that there would be such a sudden turn of events. This Yang Yi is simply a genius among geniuses. Cheng Sun Wuji stroked his beard, with admiration in his eyes. At such a young age, he can be so comprehensive. This person is really a genius. Fang Xuanling sighed. Yes, this strategy is bold, meticulous, and vicious, far beyond mine. I am old, and now is the era of young people. Du Ruhui smiled bitterly. Even old bones like us can't do it so well. Yang Yi is really a genius among geniuses. It's not so good to be his enemy. Every strategy of his is to torture the enemy to death. Everyone nodded in agreement. They have been paying attention to Yang Yi for a while. If Yang Yi doesn't take action, it's fine. Once he does, he will be ruthless and decisive. Li Shimin sighed and envied a little. Such a genius, why is he not in my Tang dynasty? What a pity. In the palace, Your Majesty, the people of Hangzhou sent Lord Yang off for several miles, which shows that Lord Yang is popular among the people. Shangguan Wan'er pursed her lips and smiled. Wu Zhao put away the memorial in her hand, and a smile appeared on her cold and noble face. He did a great job this time, and taught that bunch of grain merchants a lesson. It's so satisfying. But, she frowned suddenly again, it's been so long since he made such a great contribution. I'm worried about how to reward him. Otherwise, I'll just give him my third sister. A few days later, Great Zhou, outside Qianyuan Hall. Yang Yi is waiting for the summons from the Empress. He just came back from Hangzhou, and before he left, he implemented a wave of work for relief policies. It is only a matter of time before Hangzhou wants to recover. Host, Yang Yi, Poisoner Value, 116,257. Yang Yi raised his eyebrows. The last time he went to Hangzhou, he actually increased his poisoner value by a large amount. He opened the system store and browsed it out of boredom. Red Cannon Design Drawing, 150,000 poisoner value. Barrett 1, 200,000 poisoner value. Dugu 9 Swords Intensive, 500,000 poisoner value. Tisk tisk tisk. Yang Yi shook his head secretly. The system products are too expensive. If you want to buy a cannon drawing, you need 100,000 poisoner value. He was a little helpless when he suddenly found a small option next to the store, which showed the word lottery. Yang Yi was stunned, and subconsciously clicked it to take a look. A rectangular prize pool appeared in front of him, with the words, "Start the lottery," in the middle, which looked very much like the lottery interface of a certain penguin game in the future. The prizes in the prize pool were emitting various colors of light, which looked quite dazzling. A stream of information flooded into his mind. Yang Yi suddenly understood. This system store also has the function of lottery. The goods in the store are expensive, but in the prize pool, you only need 10,000 poison warrior points to draw once. Maybe you can draw a prize that is worth the money. He hesitated for a while. Anyway, the Empress summoned him for a while, so he just drew a few waves of prizes. Yang Yi's mind moved. Ding. Consume 100,000 poison warrior points and start the lottery. Closing square bracket. The next second, the prize pool exuded a hazy light. A moment later, a series of reward prompts sounded. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the skill, Insight. Ding. Congratulations to the host for improving the 5 senses. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Yang Mi's stockings. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the inheritance of Lao Ai. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Instant Noodles 10. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the character summoning card, Li Kunxiao. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Charm Improvement. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the character summoning card, Dian Wei. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Soft Hedgehog Armor, invulnerable to swords and guns *1. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Master Level Riding Skills. As these prompts continued to sound, Yang Yi felt that there was a lot more information in his mind, and at the same time, he felt that his sense of smell, hearing, and perception had been enhanced a lot. He showed excitement in his eyes. He had drawn a lot of good things in this 10-draw deal. The Insight Eye alone was worth the price. This skill can detect the identity and status of the other party, allowing him to plan strategies for a certain person in a targeted manner. The character summoning card can summon famous officials and generals in history. Dian Wei and Li Kunxiao were both famous warriors in history. A fragile strategist like him had to find 2 brave generals to protect him. After all, poisonous plots are the most hated. Especially the more famous one is, the easier it is to be targeted. So he has always been quite vigilant. Yang Yi was counting his rewards when he suddenly felt a breeze behind him. Thanks to the enhanced 5 senses of the rewards he just drew, he immediately felt that there seemed to be someone behind him. Without thinking, Yang Yi subconsciously dodged to the side and grabbed the person behind him and pushed him into the pond. Ah! A crisp sound rang out. Plop! A goose yellow figure fell into the pond. Yang Yi immediately realized that he seemed to have overreacted a little. There were hurried footsteps next to him. Your Highness the Princess. Yang Yi was stunned. Princess. He looked closely. A girl in the pond was soaked at this time, Her dignified bun was messy, revealing her snow-white face, and she was screaming. Yang Yi. He hurried to the shore, grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her up. Fortunately, the pond was not deep, and the girl only got her clothes wet, and it was not a big deal. After the girl got ashore, the maids beside her helped her, looking nervous. Your Highness. Yang Yi's mouth twitched, and her face looked a little strange. Of the 3 sisters of the Wu family, only the 3rd princess should be still in the palace. This girl should be the legendary 3rd princess. Wu Mingyu coughed violently, feeling extremely unlucky. She came to find her second sister. I heard from Sister Shangguan that her second sister planned to introduce her to a young and promising husband, Yang Yi, who solved the chaos of grain prices in Hangzhou. The girl was ignorant and quite curious about love, and she did not resist it. She originally planned to come and take a look. As a result, she saw Yang Yi standing alone by the pond. The maid next to her told her that this was the champion. The princess was usually carefree and didn't feel shy, so she took the initiative to greet him. Who would have thought that as soon as she approached and was about to speak, she was pulled into the pond by the guy. Her carefully dressed makeup was messed up. Just when she was coughing, she heard the person in front of her say, "Ah, Princess, why did you attack me?" Wu Mingyu almost vomited blood in anger. Why did she attack? This guy is really good at turning the tables. She glared at Yang Yi fiercely. This princess just wanted to come over and say hello, who wanted to attack you? Yang Yi blinked and glanced at Wu Mingyu's wet chest. The princess's clothes were as thin as a cicada's wing. After getting wet, a large area of plump white skin was exposed, which was quite attractive. Although she was not very old, she was very heavy. Yang Yi felt a little emotional and said calmly, "Her Royal Highness did not make any sound or movement. I thought someone was attacking me, so I reacted violently. Her Royal Highness is broad-minded and will not hold it against me." Wu Mingyu's dark eyes widened. She had never seen such a shameless person. He was the one who did it, but he became the victim. Well, is this the weight of the top counselor around my sister? No wonder she had heard about how cruel this champion was all the way. Now she had seen it. He could be so cruel to a cute and lovely girl like her, and he could also frame and slander her. He was indeed a ruthless character. She stood up angrily and was about to speak. Suddenly, Shangguan Wan'er walked out slowly, looked at the embarrassed Wu Mingyu strangely, bowed, and then said to Yang Yi, "Your Majesty has dealt with the matter. Please invite Lord Yang into the palace." Yang Yi thought to himself that he came at the right time. It was indeed a bit embarrassing to accidentally throw this girl into the river just now. Fortunately, he was thick-skinned. He immediately said, "Please ask Shangguan Xiu to lead the way." Shangguan Wan'er nodded, and prepared to go to the palace with Yang Yi. Wu Mingyu on the side shouted, "I'll go in too." Shangguan Wan'er was stunned and blinked. "Your Highness, His Majesty has only summoned Lord Yang." "Your Highness. Why don't you go change clothes first?" She looked at Wu Mingyu's chest with a strange expression, and the girl's full chest propped up her clothes, looming. Wu Mingyu then realized that her clothes seemed a little transparent. She screamed and ran away with her skirt. After a while, in the palace, Wu Jiao rubbed her eyebrows and looked at Yang Yi not far away. A trace of surprise flashed across her cold and noble face. Then she became calm again. I don't know if it was her illusion, but I always felt that Yang Yi seemed to be much more handsome after not seeing him for a month. She didn't know that Yang Yi had just received a charm boost from the system, and thought that she might have some kind of mind at work. Her Majesty pursed her lips and calmed down her emotions, her black and white eyes moving. She pondered, "You handled it well this time. The grain price in Hangzhou has stabilized, and those profiteers have been punished. I really didn't misjudge you. Although you are young, you are much better than those old antiques in the court." Yang Yi smiled but said nothing. There is no need to be overly modest, he is indeed better than those people. Wu Jiao calmed down and pondered. "In the past 6 months, you have made many great contributions in succession. I have always been clear about rewards and punishments. I plan to confer you the title of Zongshu Shilang and the title of Kaiguo County Baron. What do you think?" Even though Yang Yi was deep-minded, he couldn't help but be shocked by the Empress's generosity at this time. Not only did she give him the title, but she also promoted him to the position of Zongshu Shilang. You should know that the Zongshu Shalang of the Great Zhou dynasty can participate in the discussion of state affairs. Compared with the Zongshu Sharon, although it sounds similar, the power is very different. The Zongshu Ling is in charge of assisting the emperor in handling major affairs. There are 2 Shalangs under him. The 4th rank is the deputy of Zongshu Ling. They participate in the major affairs of the court and appoint officials in front of the palace. If the 4 barbarians come to the court, they will receive their memorials and report them. If the Zongshu Ling is a veritable prime minister, then Zongshu Shalang must be the deputy prime minister. This time, the Empress rewarded him generously, which can be said to be a step to heaven. Yang Yi met the Empress's eyes and said calmly, "Just at your command." Wu Zhao nodded slightly, and the corners of her ruddy lips curled up a little. "If so, then it's settled." Yang Yi bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Wu Zhao suddenly smiled, and her cold face bloomed with amazing charm. But the smile was only a flash, which made Yang Yi feel sorry. She returned to her usual coldness and indifference, but her tone was a little softer. "You are now in your early 20s, and you have already ascended to the position of Zongshu Shalang. Looking at the world, there are few people who can match you. When do you plan to consider your major life event?" Hearing the Empress's ridicule, Yang Yi muttered in his heart. The Empress is already 24 years old, which is considered old according to the current era. You are not anxious, so why should I be anxious? But of course, this cannot be said out loud, otherwise the Empress will definitely turn her face. Age is a taboo for women, and it is the same in any era. I think marriage is not something that can be rushed. When it is your turn, you will become more and more anxious, and often you will end up making things worse. Yang Yi said casually. Wu Zhao raised her eyebrows. "I have a 3rd sister who is waiting to be married. If you have free time, you can get to know each other." Yang Yi twitched the corner of his mouth. Why did the Empress suddenly introduce her sister to him? He just dragged her sister into the water. He coughed lightly. "Thank you for your kindness, Your Majesty, but we have already met." Wu Zhao was stunned. Met? Yang Yi had no choice but to tell what happened just now. After all, this matter could not be concealed. Instead of letting Wu Mingyu exaggerate, it would be better for him to speak up. After listening to Yang Yi, the Empress couldn't help laughing. She didn't expect that her naughty sister would be punished the first time she met Yang Yi. She blinked her black and white eyes and said with a smile, "What do you think of my sister?" In order to avoid being wooed by aristocratic families in the future, Yang Yi, a top strategist, might as well be pulled into her camp directly. Besides, Yang Yi is also a handsome man, more than enough to match her sister. Yang Yi was stunned. This question is not easy to answer. He thought for a moment and said, "As beautiful as the moonlight shining on the jade forest, as beautiful as the morning glow reflecting on the pearl pond, the 3rd princess is as beautiful as a flower, and she is worthy of being a royal lady." The corners of Wu Zhao's rosy lips curled up. "So you like her?" Yang Yi didn't expect the Empress to be so aggressive and so concerned about his marriage. He was a little impatient and blurted out subconsciously, "Ah, Your Majesty, the 3rd princess is 28 years old, several years younger than me. In fact, I like older ones." After he said this, the atmosphere in the palace suddenly fell into silence. Yang Yi regretted it as soon as he finished speaking. Isn't what he said referring to the Empress? But it was his true thought. The 3rd princess Wu Mingyu was only 16 years old, which would be the age of junior high school in the future. Although in this era, there are teenage girls who are mothers, but he is not a pervert after all. The Empress, who is 24 or 25 years old, is more in line with his aesthetics. The Empress at this age is the most beautiful stage of a woman, like a blooming rose, revealing the mature and noble charm of a woman. But although he thought so, he couldn't say it. After all, this era is different from the future. Even in the future, teasing female leaders is a taboo. The silence in the hall is so quiet that you can hear a pin drop. Wu Zhao's face is calm, and there is no wave on her cold and noble face. She didn't seem to hear the deep meaning of Yang Yi's words, but just said lightly, "There's no rush for this, you can just be friends first." "Okay, you can leave first, I'm tired." Seeing that the Empress didn't seem to hear any extra meaning, Yang Yi hurriedly took her leave. When Yang Yi left, the Empress was the only one left in the whole hall. The Empress took a deep breath, and a blush gradually climbed up her white jade neck, gradually spreading to her ears. A trace of shame and anger appeared in her black pearl-like eyes. This fool dared to tease her. It's really rebellious. Just then, a burst of hurried footsteps suddenly sounded in the hall. Royal sister. Wu Mingyu ran over in a hurry, holding the skirt she had just changed, and said angrily, "Royal sister, I want to complain." Wu Zhao glanced at her. "Yang Yi threw you into the river." Wu Mingyu's eyes suddenly widened. "Royal sister, how did you know?" Wu Zhao shook her head helplessly. "He just told me. Also, you are a princess of the royal family, so don't be so noisy in the future. You can't blame others if they misunderstand you for a sneak attack." Wu Mingyu. This kid actually put the blame on her in advance. This princess is so angry. The news of Yang Yi's promotion quickly attracted the attention of many people. It was shocking that he was promoted to the position of Zongshu Shilang at the age of 20. It can be said that he was favored by the emperor. It made countless people jealous. However, this credit is not to be tarnished. The impact of the drought in Hangzhou has been eliminated to the minimum. If someone else comes, it will probably be difficult. Yang Mansion. Yang Yi used all the character summoning cards. A flash of light passed by. Two people appeared in front of him. One of them was strong and tall, with a fierce face. It was Dian Wei. The man next to him looked ordinary and of medium build, but just standing there, he had a calm and steady feeling that made people feel at ease. It was Li Kunxiao who was defeated by Li. Yang Yi nodded with satisfaction. "From now on, you two will stay by my side and act as guards." Li Kunxiao, Dian Wei responded quickly. "Yes, sir." 3 days later, Minister Yang, the third princess invites you. A palace maid came over breathlessly and bowed respectfully to Yang Yi. Yang Yi raised his eyebrows. He pondered for a moment, put down the memorial in his hand, and then followed the maid to Wu Mingyu's bedroom. "I don't know what the third princess wants to see him for. But the face of the princess should still be given." A moment later, Shuyu Palace. "This subordinate has met the third princess," Yang Yi said with a smile. The princess in front of him was wearing a light blue Lushan long dress, revealing her snow-white collarbone and full chest, looking quite delicate. Wu Mingyu blinked, put her hands behind her back, and snorted. "A few days ago, you actually complained to the emperor's sister first. It was obviously you who pushed me, but in the end I became the scapegoat. It's simply unreasonable." Yang Yi glanced at the third princess thoughtfully, smiling. "It's indeed my fault, then I apologize to the princess." Hey. Wu Mingyu obviously didn't expect Yang Yi to answer like this, which was completely different from the sophistry she imagined. She hurriedly said, "Wait, you cheated me once, so you owe me a favor and have to do me a favor." Yang Yi raised his eyebrows. This little girl was waiting for him here. He said with a serious face, "Princess, please speak. I am a minister of the Great Zhou. If the princess has a problem, how can I sit idly by? No matter what happens, princess, just tell me. I can't help with big things, and I don't like to help with small things, but princess, remember, come to me if you have any problems." Wu Mingyu was confused at the end. Her dark eyes blinked and looked at Yang Yi blankly. This person is quite nice. Wait, isn't it just a waste of time to talk for a long time? Wu Mingyu suddenly reacted. She looked at Yang Yi angrily, and her chubby face was full of indignation. "You are playing tricks on me." Yang Yi couldn't help laughing. This princess is quite interesting and cute. It's a pity that there are not many records of the third son of the Wu family in history, and he only just met the princess in front of him. He said seriously, "Your Highness, you misunderstood. I was just joking with you. Please tell me. I will definitely give you a solution." Wu Mingyu glanced at Yang Yi angrily and curled her lips. "You still have a conscience. It's nothing, but a few children from noble families are entangled and make me very annoyed. Can you find a way to get them out?" Yang Yi raised his eyebrows. "So you want him to give you advice? Then you have found the right person, right? Playing dirty tricks has always been his strong point," he said without hesitation. "This is simple, Your Highness, just invite them to hunt, and then hide 300 swordsmen and axemen. When they arrive, just kill them and frame the beasts in the forest." Wu Mingyu widened her eyes, looking stunned. This is too cruel. It won't cause any deaths. Yang Yi sneered. Since they dared to bother your highness, you must kill them. Wu Mingyu wrinkled her nose. If you kill them, won't my reputation be ruined? Who will dare to approach me in the future? What if I can't get married? Yang Yi straightened his chest and said with a smile. The counselor has committed himself to the game, so I can just marry the princess reluctantly, right? Wu Mingyu's ears turned red. She was no match for Yang Yi in terms of shamelessness. She said angrily, "You are the top counselor under the imperial sister. No, you have to think of a way for me to make them disappear from my sight without killing anyone." Yang Yi was speechless. This princess is really naive, not as smart as the Empress. He touched his chin, staring at Wu Mingyu with a smile. "Well, I will give you another way." When he was about to say it, Wu Mingyu looked alert. "You can't kill anyone." Yang Yi smiled. He said seriously, "Don't worry, princess, I'm actually a good person." Wu Mingyu snorted. "You are also a good person." She heard from her imperial sister about what Yang Yi did, and each one was more outrageous than the other. This seemingly harmless counselor would harm people without blinking an eye. Yang Yi raised the corner of his lips and said with a smile, "As long as Her Royal Highness invites them to hunt together, they will certainly agree happily. Give them a proper amount of laxatives the night before. In this way, when hunting the next day, as long as the movements are a little more intense, they will definitely have stomach discomfort and diarrhea, making a big fool of themselves in front of the person they love, and they will definitely never appear in front of you again in the future." Wu Mingyu was so shocked that she couldn't even close her rosy little mouth. She looked at Yang Yi with a dull face. This guy is too cruel. It's easy to know that if something like this really happens, those children of noble families will never have the face to appear in front of her again. This trick is too bad. Wu Mingyu suddenly shuddered. This guy can't be provoked. If this guy wants to take revenge on her one day. Wu Mingyu was a little terrified. She pursed her lips. Are you being too mean?" Yang Yi mourned for those noble children for a few seconds and said with a smile, "Just tell me if it works or not. Besides, this matter has nothing to do with me. It's the princess who wants to do it." Wu Mingyu, this guy has cleared himself completely. Is this the strength of the most important counselor of the Emperor's sister? Wait, the Emperor's sister seems to want to introduce him to her. If he becomes her husband, won't he have to sleep with half an eye open? However, it seems not bad, at least he can help her with advice and solve many troubles. Wu Mingyu fell into deep thought. The girl's mind is like the stars in the sky, flickering and unpredictable. Yang Yi wanted to tease the third princess again. There was a sound of footsteps in the palace. "Minister Yang, His Majesty invites you." A palace maid hurried over and said. Yang Yi was stunned. The Empress urgently summoned him. Did something happen? A moment later, Yang Yi appeared in Qianyuan Hall. The Empress looked as cold as ice. A circle of ministers surrounded her. Seeing Yang Yi coming over, Wu Zhao said in a deep voice, "You are here. Take a look at this letter." Yang Yi took a letter from the Empress. He took a look and was stunned. It turned out to be a letter from the Qing dynasty, and it was written by the current emperor of the Qing dynasty, Qianlong. Generally speaking, letters are usually not written by the emperor himself. After all, official documents of this nature must be considered word by his subordinates, and finally passed through several review levels before being approved and issued by the emperor. However, the emperor of the Qing dynasty seemed to be quite confident, showing off a wave of magnificent calligraphy, and the words were full of the atmosphere of courtship. That's right, this is a marriage letter sent by Emperor Qianlong of the Qing Empire. The object of the marriage is the Empress. It is he who wants to marry the Empress. Yang Yi finished reading the letter with a strange expression, put it down, and fell into deep thought. As far as he knew, the emperor of the Qing dynasty was almost 40 years old, and he was actually thinking about a girl in her 20s. More importantly, how could a king of a country marry over there? Not to mention Qianlong, even superpowers like Qin and Tang would not issue such insulting documents. Let the Empress marry over there. Isn't this naked coveting the territory of the Great Zhou? Want to find a way to force the Empress to marry over there without bloodshed, and then take over the territory of the Great Zhou naturally. No, buddy, you would never do this in your dreams. Don't take the face of the Great Zhou into consideration at all. This is more than just a document, it's simply a provocation. No wonder the Empress is so angry. Too shameless, old Qianlong. Yang Yi put down the document in his hand, speechless. Did the Emperor of Qing get kicked in the head by a donkey? He actually wants to marry the Empress of my great Zhou, but he doesn't even take a piss to look at himself. Is he worthy? Wu Jiao felt relieved when she heard this. She couldn't help but pat the dragon chair, and her phoenix eyebrows were raised. Yes, is he worthy? Not to mention that I am the monarch of the Great Zhou and it is impossible for me to marry outside. He is more than 10 years older than me. I also heard that this person is affectionate everywhere. Every time he goes on a private visit, he has to leave a lot of illegitimate children. He is simply shameless. Only Yang Yi cursed directly. Although the other ministers were also quite angry after reading it, no one helped her to curse. Now it is really comfortable to listen to Yang Yi's scolding. Xu Jingzong stroked his beard on the side. The reason why Emperor Qianlong is so arrogant and overbearing is that the Qing dynasty has experienced decades of development and recuperation. Today, the Qing dynasty is not weak. This person has always been self-important and compares himself to his ancestors. He must be ambitious and wants to expand his territory and create a career. He has coveted the territory of other countries for a long time. Compared with other major countries in the Central Plains, our Great Zhou has just ended the war with the Turks and has experienced many disasters. The national strength has been damaged. It is also expected that he will target us. This letter may be a marriage on the surface, but it is actually forcing our Great Zhou to break up with them. In this way, the Qing dynasty will have a reason to put pressure on our Great Zhou. After all, he has been in the officialdom for many years and has a sharp eye. He immediately revealed the reason why the Qing dynasty is so overbearing. Wu Jiao said coldly, "So what? Is my Great Zhou afraid of him?" Li Yifu on the side smiled bitterly. "Your Majesty, the treasury is now empty. It may be difficult to support the war against other countries." Wu Jiao fell silent. She was so tight on the back of her hand that veins almost popped out. If the Great Zhou had not needed so much money in the past 2 years, how could she have endured such humiliation? "I'm afraid that the moment I receive the document, I would have to send troops to severely attack the Qing kingdom." "Do you mean that I should endure this humiliation?" After a moment of silence, the cold voice of the Empress sounded. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became as cold as ice, and there was a dead silence. Everyone looked at each other. Everyone knew that the Empress was unhappy, but the gap between their strength and that of the Qing kingdom was here. If they really wanted to fight, their treasury would not be able to support it. Li Yifu was even more embarrassed. It was as if the Empress was questioning him. At this time, a young voice sounded, "Your Majesty, if the king humiliates you, the minister will die. This old fool has humiliated my Great Zhou so much, my Great Zhou will never surrender. You always pick on the weak. If my Great Zhou tolerates it, then what we will face next is not just the Qing dynasty, but a pack of wolves. The Qing dynasty is so provocative, we must not only fight back, but also fight back fiercely." Everyone was stunned and looked in the direction of the voice. The person who spoke was Yang Yi. Xu Jingzong shook his head. "Young man, you are still too arrogant." Li Yifu frowned and said in a deep voice. "Minister Yang, you said it nicely, but you don't know how expensive firewood, rice, oil and salt are until you run the house. Do you know how much money is left in the treasury now? If we go to war with the Qing dynasty, I'm afraid we can't hold on for long. The military expenses are not a small amount." Yang Yi raised his eyebrows. "Then according to what Li Shengshu said, we have to smile when someone steps on our faces. Such humiliation, but we can still swallow it. I can't think of anyone else except the rootless eunuch and Li Shengshu." Li Yifu's face flushed immediately, and his eyes were red. This fool actually insulted people like this, comparing eunuchs with him. Didn't this guy say he was a eunuch? The other officials looked at each other in bewilderment. They didn't expect Yang Yi to be so aggressive. But they didn't think highly of Yang Yi. After all, although Li Yifu's words were a little weak, they were also true. It's good to be brave, but anger alone is not enough, you also need strength. Wu Jiao also calmed down at this time. Her dark eyes swept over Yang Yi with a complex look. Faced with such provocation, although she was angry to the core, she also knew that it was unwise to fight with the Qing dynasty. However, reason is reason, and emotion is emotion. Yang Yi defended her like this, and she was quite relieved. He had to be a confidant she had promoted. Seeing that her ministers were full of gunpowder, Wu Jiao said lightly. Yang Qing, if my great Zhou goes to war with the Qing dynasty now, even if it is a small-scale war, it will require a lot of money. If there is money, it may not be impossible to fight with the Qing dynasty and show the blood of my great Zhou. Do you have any tricks? After saying that, she looked at Yang Yi expectantly. In the past few months, Yang Yi's various tricks have shocked her. Especially the one in Hangzhou, it was simply a divine move, which made people amazed and numbed their scalps. If Yang Yi could come up with a trick, then she would definitely teach Qianlong, the fool who didn't know the height of the world, a lesson. Li Yifu also suppressed his anger at this time and looked at Yang Yi with a sneer. He didn't believe that Yang Yi could have a way to face the aggressive Qing dynasty. Xu Jingzong and others subconsciously looked at Yang Yi. Although they didn't think Yang Yi had a solution, the various methods they used before made them dare not underestimate this Yang Shilang. Yang Yi touched his chin, met the Empress's gaze, and blinked. No tricks. Everyone was disappointed when they heard this. Li Yifu curled his lips in disdain and sneered in his heart. I knew this kid was showing off. Although Wu Jiao was a little disappointed, she looked quite calm and comforted. It doesn't matter, my great Zhou is now. She was interrupted by Yang Yi before she finished speaking. No tricks, but there is a trick that hurts people. Yang Yi said with a smile. Wu Jiao was startled. Dirty trick. Her dark eyes lit up and she asked immediately. What dirty trick? She hated Emperor Qianlong so much now. If she could use a dirty trick to make him lose, she would be willing to do it. The other officials also looked at Yang Yi with suspicion. In this situation, is there any other way? Li Yifu's face changed. Is this guy serious? Yang Yi said seriously. Since the treasury is empty and lacks money, then we can get money from the Qing dynasty. Take their money to enrich our treasury and use their money to fight them. Everyone looked at each other. Yang Yi might be crazy. Take money from the Qing dynasty to fight them. Li Yifu smiled contemptuously. He thought Yang Yi had some clever ideas, but he didn't expect to come up with such a thing. The Qing people are not stupid. Why would they give money to his great Zhou? Shangguan Wanner blinked. She thought Yang Yi would not shoot without purpose. Wu Jiao was silent for a while, frowning. How to do this? Yang Yi smiled mysteriously. Don't worry, Your Majesty, I promise that the people of Qing will take the initiative to give us money. However, before this time, I still need Your Majesty to agree to one thing. Wu Jiao was thoughtful. What is it? Yang Yi cupped his hands. Let me go to Qing. Doesn't Qianlong want to marry? Then let me represent Your Majesty to discuss this so-called marriage with the people of Qing. The hall was silent. Everyone looked at each other. They didn't expect Yang Yi to actually want to go to Qing. Li Yifu's eyes twitched. He held back his words to rebuke Yang Yi, but instead thought a little darkly in his heart that it would be great if this guy just went and never came back. Shangguan Wanner's eyes suddenly widened. In this situation, Yang Yi actually wanted to go to Qing. Wu Jiao raised her eyebrows. She thought for a moment. Yang Qing, do you want to use this as an excuse to discuss the marriage, go on a diplomatic mission to Qing, and then take their money? Yang Yi clapped his hands and praised. Your Majesty is wise. Wu Jiao frowned. I don't understand. They are not stupid. Why would they give you money for nothing and let you go? She thought about it, but couldn't figure out what Yang Yi was up to. Besides, the money needed for war is not a small amount. Yang Yi smiled. Your Majesty, just watch over it in Dazhou. I will not fail my mission. Wu Jiao opened her mouth, wanting to say something but stopped. She was worried that Yang Yi would get into trouble in Qing. However, seeing that Yang Yi seemed quite determined, she hesitated for a moment and then slowly said. Well, I will do as you say. After the voice fell, Her Majesty felt a sense of restlessness in her heart for no reason. Why did what she said sound like a wife's dependence on her husband? Fortunately, the others did not notice her abnormality, and all looked at Yang Yi in shock. No matter what Yang Yi's plan was, at least this courage was not something that ordinary people could possess. Li Yifu smiled. Then I wish Lord Yang a safe journey. Yang Yi smiled. I will not let Your Majesty down. Half a day later, Yang Yi packed his luggage and took Dian Wei, Li Kunshao, and 50 elite soldiers given by the Empress, as well as a letter of compromise, to the Qing dynasty. Half a month later, Qing dynasty, capital, Jinluan Palace. Oh, is this the handwriting of the Empress? A middle-aged man with a rat tail braid was a little surprised. He was wearing a yellow dragon robe, with a smooth forehead that was quite full, thick eyebrows, a square face and wide ears, and a beard in the shape of a character 8. This person was the current emperor of the Qing dynasty, Exanweiluo Hongli. Qianlong was also a little shocked. He didn't expect that the Empress would get angry and turn against him after he deliberately sent the letter. Qianlong was a little disappointed. He has always been arrogant and wanted to achieve the feat of expanding the territory. That's why he set his sights on the Great Zhou. He didn't expect that the young Empress would be so calm. She didn't show any flaws even when he deliberately angered her. And she even sent an envoy. Qianlong took the document. The document was quite official, and he couldn't tell what the Empress was thinking anyway. His eyes fell on the young figure in the hall. Yang Yi's mouth curled up slightly, with a hint of smile, and looked at Qianlong. The two looked at each other for a while. Qianlong frowned and suddenly laughed. Lord Yang came here on the orders of the Empress, so I can't treat him badly. I have prepared a villa for Lord Yang. Lord Yang, stay here for a few days and enjoy the scenery of our Qing dynasty. How about we discuss the marriage between the two countries? He was suspicious by nature and didn't believe that Yang Yi really came here to discuss the marriage. He just didn't know what Yang Yi was up to, so he would wait and see. Yang Yi said calmly, "Thank you, Your Majesty. I heard that the scenery of the Qing dynasty's capital is very beautiful, with rich materials and countless rare flowers and stones. This time I come to the capital, I will definitely buy more souvenirs, but it may be inconvenient to transport them back." Qianlong laughed and was quite satisfied. My Qing dynasty has everything. If you want to buy something, I will give you 10 large cargo ships and a token. With this token, you can take the waterway and load the things back. Yang Yi curled his lips and thanked him calmly. Half a day later, Yang Yi stayed in the other courtyard prepared by Qianlong. He knew Qianlong was watching him. But it didn't matter what he was going to do, even if Qianlong was watching. 2 days later, a piece of news gradually spread in the capital. The envoy of the Great Zhou came to the capital with a large sum of money to do a business with the dignitaries in the capital. A magnificent palace. Prince Kong, have you heard about it? A middle-aged man of medium build and quite fat smiled. The envoy of the Great Zhou, Yang Yi, claimed that he had a business. As long as he invested money, he could make money. The one he called Prince Kong was a gray-haired old man, who was the contemporary Iron Hat King, Prince Kangzhan Baltu, who inherited the title of Prince Heshuo Li. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.